This is your boy, Tony Maceo, live and direct from Power and Strategy TV. Thank you guys for tuning in. Those of you that are here already, I didn't advertise the show. Thank you guys for showing up, the ones that are here. Hold on, I got to get rid of this. Okay, all right. I'm here today with the lovely, the one and only Miss Nicole Michelle, who has agreed to join me today on this live. And today, I thought I'd talk about TV fathers, do an analysis of TV fathers for the the Generation Zs and Millennials. You are welcome here, but today this is grown folks discussion, and we're gonna have a little bit of fun off in here today. We're gonna show our age a little bit. We're gonna take you back to a time when we did have some semblance of a community. We did have some semblance of hope for a brighter tomorrow. I see them filing in here right now. Welcome, Miss Haley. Welcome, Miss Wilburn, Miss Maria Wilburn. Happy Friday. I hope you guys aren't too stuffed from your Thanksgiving Day feast. Miss Janelle Santos is back. Again, I hope you guys aren't too stuffed from yesterday's feast, and I'm glad to see y'all are not out there in that mob of a line on Black Friday, and I'm glad that you're here with me. And again, I got Miss Nicole Michelle in the house. And before I get started, I just want to lay this out. A lot of what I've been hearing, a lot of what I've been seeing with the Black community in the last um, 30 to 40 years, especially what I've been hearing on YouTube, is that we're losing the concept of family. We're losing the idea of family. We're losing the concept of family. Our community is imploding, regardless as to what people are telling you about this is the best of times. This is a bad Charles Dickens novel. That's what it is. It's the best of times and it's the worst of times. In the Black community, there's definitely some things that we have to do and definitely some changes we have to make. And one of the things that I'm beginning to notice is there's a difference in how we see life. There's a difference in how we see reality. And that difference is largely along the lines of class. And one of the most basic things, if you're talking about a community or you're talking about a race, is family. So there are two different ways that I think that we see family here. And in the last 20 to 30 years, we've gone through a process to where we have normalized the institution of single parent households. Now, I'm not going to engage or indulge you guys with the statistics. You know it ad nauseum. Single parent homes tend to be generally more often than not in every case, they tend to be economically deprived. There tends to be issues with children as far as behavioral issues. There are higher incarceration rates in single parent homes. There are larger dropout rates, high school dropout rates in single parent homes. There are um, um, a lack of opportunities for economic advancement coming out of single parent homes. Twice of everything that is bad and half of everything that is good. So I think from that perspective, on this holiday, Thanksgiving, where we support and we promote families, and that's even if you say you don't like Thanksgiving, and some of these Negroes that don't like Thanksgiving, they just want an excuse just to be antisocial, lazy, and trifling. So I will give them no shine here either. But the fact of the matter is there in the last, I noticed in the last 10 or 15 years, there's been a uh, fractured perspective in how we see families. And one of the two that's shaped around two of the most seminal, pivotal shows in our culture. Those shows were The Cosby Show and Good Times. So today I wanted to do an analysis of the two shows and especially an analysis of the two fathers. I want to explain who they are, where they came from, and I want to show the differences or give an analysis of the differences between the two men and the similarities between the two men because actually other than their income, there's really no difference between Heathcliff Huxtable and James Evans. There's really no difference between the two. The character biographies are different, but they're in terms of their reaction and in terms of their approach and in terms of their emphasis on family. It's largely the same. This came out of an article that I wrote a while back on the Negro Manosphere called A Tale of Two Fathers, where I did an analysis and a character breakdown of James Evans and Heathcliff Huxtable. And I wanted to go through that and see if we can flesh out issues of family, uh, issues of relationships, issues of community, and see if there's some way we can escape this narrative where presently in Black YouTube, everything is about getting laid and getting women and all of that. And because I'm known as Mr. 75 and all of that stuff, but um, we're not a monolithic people. We're not a monolithic people. And the men on YouTube, despite what you're hearing, they're not monolithic. A lot of them are just stuck on getting laid because they can't get laid with the women that they want to get laid with. So that's where a lot of this talk and this echo chamber is coming from, and this red pill, blue pill shit is coming from. So here today, I want to get away from that. Here today, I want to get away from, all of that drama. And I just want to talk to my generation Xers and those people that understand our culture and understand that period. And let's have a conversation, have a productive conversation, and have fun. Let me set some ground rules from the gate. You come in here with that red pill shit, I'm getting you up out of here. You come in here trying to clown my guests or clown my chat room or troll my chat room, I'm getting you the hell up out of here. You're free to come in here and you can disagree all you like. I don't give it, I don't really care about you disagreeing. But coming in here being disrespectful, especially to my guests and the people that are in my chat, I will not allow that. You will be up out of here. And I know some of you niggas gonna be like, you simping. Well, yeah, I'm simping and fuck you. I'm sorry I had to say that, but nevertheless, I had to say that. Fuck you. And I'll say it again. Fuck you. So with that said, here we go. And I would like to welcome to my panel today, always one of my favorite guests, almost always one of our favorite guests on MacCity.com. That is the lovely Nicole Michelle at Inner Beauty TV, the Inner Beauty Movement. I see some of her people in here. Thank you guys for coming and welcome to you, Miss Nicole Michelle. How are you doing today?
I'm awesome this Black Friday. Thanks for having me. This is going to be fun. It's always fun with you as you are off the chain, Maceo. So let's go at it.
All right. So one of the things I noticed, it was like, Good Times was a groundbreaking sitcom. Of course, it was created by Eric Monty. And the show was based on actually the Evans family was actually the name of Mike Evans, who was the real Lionel, the original Lionel on the Jeffersons. And another show, of course, was the Cosby Show, which was also groundbreaking. And I noticed one thing, like when the Cosby Show first came out, a lot of people were, a lot of, it was a wonderful show, and a lot of Black people loved it. But I started to hear a lot of rumblings among in the hood about it wasn't real. It didn't represent the hood. A lot of Black folks said, well, I don't know anybody whose dad is a doctor and whose mom is a lawyer. So they said they couldn't relate to it. But nevertheless, it was, a very positive image of a Black family on television. And they said that it was revolutionary. The critics said that it was revolutionary, and I agreed. But they seem to hearken back to Good Times. And so every time we have these discussions, they always seem to compare and contrast um, James Evans to Heathcliff Huxtable. And it's almost as if, and I know why it's happened, because in the last 20 years, we've had a certain ghettoization, a certain a certain elevation, a certain deification. They have made the hood a fetish. In the last 20 or 30 years, the hood and hood culture has become a fetish. And there's nothing wrong with that, because the hood has brought us some very beautiful things. Some very beautiful things have come out of the hood. So what has happened is we have celebrated the beauty without filtering out that which is abnormal and dysfunctional. So now there's no governor anymore. There's no filter on hood culture. So now everything hood has been elevated to be over what we would look at as normal, or what we would look at as productive. And so one of the lenses that I'm looking at this through is through this idea of family, this idea of masculinity, this idea of femininity, if you will, this idea of manhood. You had guys like Michael Eric Dyson. I'm sure, Miss Nicole, I don't know if you're familiar with it. Bill Cosby, who has become public enemy number one, or who became public enemy number one after a so-called pound cake speech that he gave, where he was basically telling black people and black families to take responsibility for our families and for our children. A certain sector of the black community revolted against that, and they turned against him. So when this trial came, which was absolutely horrible, there was no physical evidence against the man, and you had a lot of black people cheering for him to get convicted and subsequently arrested, because they was contrasting him against the image that he presented on the Cosby Show. So I say that to say, Michael Eric Dyson came out with a book called, I think it was, "Is Bill Cosby Right? And Has the Black Middle Class Lost Its Mind?" So what we saw in the last 20 years were battle lines drawn in the black community. Was the what Professor Dyson called the aristocrats versus the ghetocracy. In other words, the middle class black people, the middle class sector of the black community against the working class sector of the black community. And one of the things that I looked at, or that I believe was the embodiment of this class fissure within our community, was these two shows. So I want to start by asking you, what was your perspective on Good Times? What did you like about it? What didn't you like about it? What did you like about the characters? Which characters did you like? Which characters did you not like? And then we'll go into a subsequent discussion of these characters' backgrounds.
Okay, well, for me, Good Times, I just been on this Good Times I don't know, marathon lately. It's running all seasons are running on Stars, so I've been
Hmm.
on that kick lately. And I haven't watched those episodes in years. One of the things, it was a common theme with James, very patriarchal, very protective. His rules of the house went. Nobody, pretty much, like what he said goes, and that was so similar to my father. And so sometimes I get like teary eyed because my dad wasn't a yeller, but when he spoke, then that was pretty much it. I mean, he could give me a look, and I was like, yeah, let me shut up. I mean, and I would say at times I thought he was a little rough, but then I am where I am because of my dad, because of him being dedicated to raising me into a productive, respectable young woman, which is what James did. And I was discussing with somebody else a few days ago that James tried so hard to make sure his children, despite their surroundings, their neighborhood, he made sure, or he did his best as long as he was living, to instill values and morals into his children, even though they were surrounded by people who did not. They were working class with Cabrini Green, if you're familiar with Chicago. Um, the opening credits is Cabrini Green. I believe they're torn down now. Devin's from Chicago, so she should be able to tell you. Is so that was a very, very working class area, ghetto. Okay. And so it was rough. It was rough. It was rougher than the show portrayed, actually. Um,
Yes, it was.
yeah. And so he tried his best to raise his children despite that. And one of the things, and I wanted to ask you before I forget, about Florida, because
Hmm.
I've heard this a lot, which now I have a business being a goody two shoes. The same people who tease me about being goody two shoes are asking me about femininity now. Go figure. But um, do you think Florida, they portrayed Florida as too goody two shoes, as too like she could do no wrong, like she was just too perfect? And do you think that might have turned people off to Good Times? Now, even though they had a 6-year run, it was a lot of ups and downs with that, a lot of discrepancies with CBS, with the writers. If you know the history of the show, John Amos was upset. He got fired. Esther Rowe was fighting for a creative differences with the writing team. Jimmy Walker kind of benefited from letting him do more comedy, and it took a deviation from what the original intent for the show was. And I'm wondering if you all who remember the show or you've caught reruns, do you think they made Florida too goody two shoes? She was very moral, Christian. I mean, she pushed Christianity. There's no way Good Times would make it now. Because Florida pushed Christianity like nobody's business. Do you think that was just way too much for the time, and that's why the show kind of declined? Because I look at the ratings decline the fourth and the fifth season. They brought Keith on as a last ditch effort. Remember, Penny came fourth season or fifth
Right.
season. So it was sort of like they were just adding characters, adding, when they start adding a whole bunch of characters, that's the beginning of the end. And Keith was their last ditch effort. So do you think Florida, her matriarchal perfectness or whatever. Do you think she was perfect? Do you think they just went overboard with her character?
Well, I think that Florida she was actually, they had a episode on there where they talked about just that. When she got, after James passed, when she hooked up with Carl. And so Carl's criticism was that you're perfect, and the rest of the family agreed with her. So agree with them, excuse me. They agree with them. So I say that to say, yes, but that's, to me, in my generation, that isn't any more different, or that it's the same as if you grew up in any black household where there was a mother and a father. In my household, the person that was the most church oriented, that was the most Christian centered, was my mother. So what did I feel she was perfect? Yes, but not any more different than what a lot of kids of my generation had with their mothers, those that grew up in two-parent households. So yes, was there times when she was aggravating with that shit? Absolutely, it was. Were there times when she could be a bit over the top with it? Yes, absolutely, she was. But I also think that Florida kept James centered. And I think that there's something to be said for her demeanor, in that while Florida probably at times wasn't the most submissive, at times while she was really, really extra with her Christianity, I'd be willing to say that the mother wit, she erred on the side of caution. You still have to give it to her, because even her heavy emphasis on Christianity and her heavy sense of morality is what kept her family on track. So was she perfect? Yeah. Was she portrayed at times in the show as a little too perfect? There's no question. Did that shit get on a lot of people's nerves? Yeah, there's no question. But I would say it isn't anything different than what we've been used to seeing in our families. I don't know about your mother or your family, but my mother was most definitely the one that was more inclined towards Christianity than my father. Now, of course, that changed in subsequent years as they get older. But I see Florida in almost every two parent, and honestly, in a lot of single parent homes, such as there were back in
My
the
mom
70s,
was
80s, and the 90s.
my mom was more like Florida than she was Claire. And my mom
Exactly.
worked. My mom
Ex-
actually worked and had
ex-
a master's degree plus some hours. But she
exactly.
acted more like Florida than she did um
Like Claire.
Claire. Yeah, actually.
What that was my thing. It's like, okay, yeah, she was aggravating, but there were times when she was right. For instance, to recall an episode, Smiling Sam, the happiness man, you know, played by the great actor, the late Roscoe Lee Brown. When he came in and he wanted to take James with him on the road for his sham Christian revival. And so Florida was saying, don't do this. Don't do this. This isn't right what you're doing. And she was like, this guy he's committing blasphemy. He's taking the Lord's name in vain, and so forth and so on. A shout out to LAR, he's in the room. But he's taking the Lord's name in vain. And come to find out, when they looked at the episode, when they saw the episode, as the episode proceeded, rather, you saw JJ starting to act like Smiling Sam. He started to get into the con, and that was something. At that point, everything that James was working to keep outside of his door or at the door's edge of that home or that apartment that he had on the 17th floor, he began to see that everything he had been fighting to keep out of his home was now creeping into his home. And so, from that perspective, he saw that what Florida was doing was right. What Florida was saying was correct.
I think, Maceo, I think Good Times, because we were little, we were small, and we caught syndication.
Yes.
But I think in Good Times heyday, they met
Right.
the same criticism that Bill Cosby met with Cosby Show. That's not me. I live in Detroit. We live in an upper middle class neighborhood in Detroit. You know, Detroit was popping
Yeah,
in
it was.
in the 60s. You
It
know, it
was.
started to decline in the 70s, but for the most part, Black people were coming out of that seemingly that look of poverty, and we
Right.
were still coupled up, we were still married and have families. So the idea, this notion, and I presented it to my friend who I was talking about this very thing with, and I was like, do you think that the Good Times represented Harriet, the help, the butler at the time when Black people were trying to come out of that poverty type of stereotype, and they were fighting so hard to be seen as hardworking Americans? Now they put Good Times where you have this family in the hood and they, struggling. Good times can't never come up. Is that why they had so much pushback, and why? Well, that's another question for later. But do you think that's the situation why they met so much pushback back in the day?
I think they met pushback because, on one hand, again, niggas don't know what they want. On one hand, they want to see black people getting over, and then on the other hand, they're going to say that they don't know any black people that are getting over. So it's a situation where you can't satisfy niggas in either scenario. But where you're talking about where Good Time starts off, a lot of people, they did not like the ghetto imagery. They did not want to identify with the ghetto. They didn't want to identify with the struggle. They didn't want to identify with that
My mother hated Good
perception.
Times. My
Yeah.
mother absolutely hated Good Times. She thought Walona was too fast. Yeah.
So they couldn't identify with that culture, but you got to remember, we also came out of a period of the late 60s and early 70s. The late 60s and early 70s was the period of the Black Power movement. So you had a shift in consciousness, and Thomas Sowell talks about this in his book, Black White Liberals and Black Rednecks. And he talks about, and this is one of the very few things, I think he's a good economist, but this is one of the very few things I agree with him on. He said that the Black Power movement and the shift that the Civil Rights movement took in the 70s was it kind of valorized and glamorized ghetto culture, and it made it seem as though that those blacks in the ghetto or in the hood, as it may be, were the true black. In other words, those are the real niggas. The ones that were struggling. And you had a group of black people that were trying to advance beyond that. And so, like you said, that consciousness, the consciousness of the times, was really in conflict with the aspirations of the community, because there were some people that wanted to see black people get over. And Devin Haley mentions, of course, the Jeffersons, and we got a chance to see that, but niggas had some issues with the Jeffersons too. But I think it was very much a clash of cultures within the black community, because they did not want to see uh, black people in the hood struggling. But what I always remind them of was this: James Evans wasn't unemployed, he was underemployed. James Evans had two jobs. You know, James Evans lived in the home with his wife and his children.
He fought to stay. He
He
fought to
he
stay.
fought to stay. James Evans was like this. James Evans said, "Look, I know at this point there may not be anything for me as far as what's out there, but what I will not do is surrender my family to the vices that surround me. In other words, he gave a kind of sacrifice. He sacrificed himself for the future of his children. And that's what any good father would do. And that is a very noble thing. But I also think, see, in the Black community, we're not that far from being in Cabrini Green projects. This narrative that you've been hearing, that people have been saying on YouTube, that the Black community is middle class, that's just not true. The Black
Oh, you know
community,
what? I want to stay there for a second because
okay.
do you think that that was the pushback from a lot of Black people at the time? I'm just trying to place ourselves there mentally, why our parents didn't really like good times. Was it because we were fighting that image of being lower class, of being the bottom class, and we were trying to transcend those stereotypes?
That's exactly what it was. I think that's exactly, we were fighting that image, but I will say that that image was all too real. Because what if you understand the character, and some people say, well, Good Times was propaganda, all media is propaganda. To some degree, yes, but sometimes art reflects life. But let me answer your question more specifically. Good Times takes place in the 1970s. And as you pointed out earlier, this was during the period the Great Migration took place between 1932 and 1972. What am I saying? What is the Great Migration, Tony? What are you talking about? The Great Migration was that flood, was that group of Black people that immigrated from the South to the North. They went into cities like Chicago. They went into cities like Detroit. They went into cities like Philadelphia. They went into cities like Harlem. They went into cities like Boston. They went into cities like East Orange in New Jersey. They went into cities like Newark, New Jersey, and so forth and so on. Why? Because during World War II, the plants opened up, and our families and our fathers and our mothers could find jobs in those factories because we were in a war-based economy. We were going into and coming out of World War II and well, World War One. The Great Migration started in 32. That was during the period of the Great Depression. So many of us were leaving the South and going into these cities, and we were finding work in the factories as the buildup
Which we
for the
might
war
be
effort
doing
began,
another migration from the
which we
West Coast and from the North back down to the South.
back
I
down to the
digress.
South.
I
Atlanta,
digress.
Atlanta is the personification. It's the epitome of the Great Migration. Your town is the epitome. It's nothing but a little New York, but it's just a little nicer.
Yeah,
Anyway,
we all over the place down here.
okay. So anyway, what happened was you had that group of Black people going to the North looking for opportunities, and a lot of Black people found work in those factories, and it provided them a middle class income. Those people that took that trek out of the South and went to the North, they found work in GM. They found work in Ford. They found work in Buick and Pontiac in those plants, and they were able to get a pretty nice income. I remember back in the day, for example, as I digress here shortly, Flint, Michigan was a booming city.
Oh yeah, Flint was the place to be if you wasn't in Detroit. That was the place
Exactly.
to be for Black
Look
people.
look at it back then during that period, during the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and then look at it now. It is a sad uh, shadow of what it used to be. But during that period, you had Black people going in, joining that Great Migration, and finding that kind of employment. So we were coming up, so to speak. So as we were coming up, we didn't want that same old image of struggling and hard times or failure. It was this idea of the old song, Happy Days Are Here Again, that type thing. So we didn't want, to some extent, we didn't want imagery that reminded us of where we came from. We didn't want images that reminded us of who we were. But you have to know who you are and where you came from, because if you don't know who you are and where you came from, you never know where you're going. You know, so I do think that there was a clash, that some people had a problem with the culture, and then you had some Black people from the South. There was a strong aversion to Northern culture. Period. There was some Black people, Southern Black people, that had a deep disdain for city life and for urban life. So I think that that was another thing. There were a lot of Southern black people that didn't like that fast paced life in the cities. So when they saw that reflected on television, it turned a lot of them off. And then when they, of course, when they saw it reflected in the terms of the hood or of the ghetto, of course it was a turnoff when at that period when a lot of people were obtaining a degree of prosperity by working in the plants. So yes, I do think it was problematic.
But also, you know, when we start talking about the breakdown of the black family in particular, there's always this talking point. Shout out to LAR. Absolutely. Gary, Indiana was booming as well.
Hmm.
Um, but there's always this the talking point that the family started to break down because the black woman pushed the black man out of the house in place of
Let me clear this up. See, I'm
and good
tired. I'm
times.
tired of hearing that.
Good
Uh,
times actually was the total opposite because James was in the hood with his kids. But go ahead.
Here's what happens. See, they tell you the truth, but they don't tell you the whole truth. See, this is the problem I got in these sectors on Black YouTube. They tell you the truth, but they don't tell you the whole truth. Nobody threw these niggas out in favor of welfare. Okay? I'm gonna say this, and if you got a problem with it, I don't give a shit. Most of those niggas that were out of the house were already gone. Okay? They were already gone. The welfare that they're talking about was the continuation of the welfare program, which we were not really allowed to participate in during the era of the Great Depression. That was the welfare was legislation that wound up including us from all the areas where we were excluded during the period of the Great Depression. Now, was welfare problematic? Yes, it was. It absolutely was because the country was constant. It was part of Lyndon Johnson's Great Society programs. Now, the man who actually wrote that program up, the man who actually drafted, the man who was the hand behind the Great Society was a black congressman from Harlem by the name of Adam
Adam
Clayton
Clayton Powell.
Powell.
Yes.
Okay. The legislation that Adam Clayton Powell wrote was very different than what Johnson subsequently approved. So when Moynihan jumped out and he was studying that small sector, that small but growing sector of single parent homes in the black community during that period, that wasn't a situation where the black woman said, okay, I'm gonna take this money and I'm gonna put you in the streets. That's not what happened. Most of those guys had already left the community. What happened was welfare prevented her from bringing a man in the home. It wasn't welfare or home. Welfare effectively, the acceptance of welfare subsequently locked a woman out of the process of bringing a man in the home.
So were you saying they were already single mothers?
They were already single mothers.
Okay. All
A
right.
lot of those niggas were already gone, but
They
what
weren't
welfare
married.
done, what
Okay.
welfare did, welfare maintained single motherhood.
Gotcha.
That's what happened. So it came after the fact uh, 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 of a situation where it froze out the father. It didn't kick out the father, it just locked the door behind him. Okay. Now, LAR says that the implementation of the welfare rules racially was part of the problem. Yes, it was. I agree with you. I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just disagreeing with the talking point that you're hearing a lot. Because as it was implemented, for instance, Adam Clayton Powell, when he implemented his welfare reform, the money for these programs, these welfare programs, it was weighted at the top. In other words, most of the money was going to the administrators. It was going to the people that were running these programs, but it wasn't going to the people that needed it. Now, if you recall, there was a term that they came up with in the 60s. It's called poverty pimp. I don't know if you've ever heard of that term.
I have not, sir, but I know you're gonna explain it to us.
Poverty pimp was a term that uh, that they use. It was a pejorative term that they use against these administrators of these programs, whereas these people would come in and create these little programs that really didn't help the community. In other words, they would create a program where they opened up a community center teaching hood kids how to fence. And so Adam Clayton Powell said, well, wait a minute. Why are you getting $40,000, which is a significant amount of money for the 60s and 70s, which is today is the equivalent of about $80 to $90,000. Why are you getting that kind of money teaching ghetto kids how to fence when none of this money is going towards job creation? None of this money is going towards tax incentives. None of this money is going towards creating any type of industry. None of this money is going to any industry to create jobs in these communities to where these people won't need welfare. Adam Clayton Powell was ignored. Subsequently, some things happened, and he was excluded from Congress, and I won't go into that. But the legislation that he wrote was against all of this money being administered to all these people who receive this money for these nothing programs that never helped the community, never helped the community. So when welfare was over, and it was a scam, oh no question about it, it was a scam because it perpetrated a system of dependency and entitlement while allowing the administrators to walk off with the bulk of the money for the people that it was intended to serve. Okay. So this idea about welfare did this, and yes, welfare was a trap. It was a liberal trap. It was white folks calling themselves trying to do the right thing the wrong way. You understand? So this thing about the black women threw black men out, bullshit. The people that got that shit, they were already gone. Now, if you there was a movie that came out during the 70s starring one of your favorites, the late Diane Carroll,
Claudine, yeah.
Claudine, with
Mm-hmm.
James Earl Jones. James Earl Jones. Uh, uh, oh, okay. I got another one in here. Fathers were already gone is his assumption and thoughts not fact. No, it is a fact that those niggas were already gone. That's how she got the aid in the first place. You couldn't get welfare if there was a father in the home.
So originally, because I discussed this in my femininity course, originally wasn't welfare set up for the widows of World War II?
It was.
Okay, so
It
how
was.
did these women get this welfare? Because we're coming round robin back to fathers, because the Good Times image was James. He was totally opposite of this argument because he was actually in the home, and that's why for a long time I was like, this is definitely television, because all I've heard was that if you live in the ghetto, you don't have a daddy. So when I watched Good Times, I was like, well, there's a daddy, and he acts like my daddy. But
Exactly.
okay, so where did this whole how did those women get on welfare?
Those women were on welfare because that man wasn't in the home to begin with. See, what I don't want to do, although we had a working and viable society, I am careful to say, see, a lot of black people want to look at the past through this lens of nostalgia, and it's a bit more complicated than that. They want to say, back then we were perfect, and we were a lot better than where we are now. In some instances, I get that, but it was far from perfect. Back then, it was single parent. Back then, there was single parent homes. It just wasn't as prolific, and it just wasn't exaggerated as it is now. Okay,
Game
so
Changer says they were poor but not on welfare. So if they got in Cabrini Green, it's because if they qualified due to income, not because they were on welfare necessarily. Do you
exactly.
agree, Mr. Maceo?
Exactly. Some people will qualify. It's just like right now. You can go to subsidized housing and qualify based on your income, and you're not necessarily on welfare. And that was the thing that James fit into. The family was poor, but he wasn't on He made too much for welfare. As a
The
matter of
working
fact,
poor, working poor.
exactly, the working poor. So the episode with him was when they went to the welfare office and they saw my man Sweet Lenny, the booster. Uh, the welfare office said that she made way too much money. She made way too much money.
James did, yeah.
James made way too much
Mhm,
money to
mhm.
get on welfare, so he didn't even qualify. So those women that were on welfare, they didn't kick the man out the house and take the money. The man was already gone. But what welfare did do was it locked the man out the house. So in other words, it prohibited her from getting a husband where one would have been available. Now that movie,
So
go
are
ahead.
we saying single motherhood not to take this on a tangent,
Mhm,
but if we're going to dissect this talking
mhm.
point, let's go on and dissect all the way up, because I'm trying to understand if if women kick the man out, when did these women, or when did the government start giving women welfare? Because welfare was set up for the widows of World War II, was my
What
understanding.
it came about during in 1965.
Okay.
The thing that we presently know as welfare came about in 1965 under President Johnson's Great Society. That's where it came from. Now, one of his cabinet representatives or his cabinet officials was Moynihan, this Daniel Patrick Moynihan, and he was looking at the poverty in the inner city, and he was saying,
We
"Well, wait
already
a
know the
minute."
report. Hmm.
Yes, he said, "Well, wait a minute. This is not going to solve this problem here. You giving them this money is not going." Moynihan was eventually, although he said some very vicious things, he was right when he said that welfare was not going to solve the problem. It was going to perpetuate dependency. It perpetuate dependency because it locked the man out of the home. That was the problem. It locked him out. It didn't kick him out.
So
It
it was
locked him
going
out.
to permanently keep
it,
them
it
in
would
poverty.
permanently keep them in poverty. Exactly. So what happened was, she took the money. Okay, there's no nigger on the horizon. So she went ahead and took the money because, again, a bird in the hand is worth more than the bush. So she went ahead and took that money because it was survival. She took that money, and the consequences were exactly as Moynihan said they would be. And she got, and that crippled the family structure going on into the 70s and subsequently the 80s, 90s, and so forth and so on. But
So
this
you do agree? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
so this idea that it kicked them out, no, they were already gone. It just locked the door behind them. In the movie Claudine, you saw where um, you saw a situation to where the man came in home and she was on welfare. She had like some insane amount of children, 9 or 10 children, and he came back in the home. And then you saw and they would actually do that, by the way. They would pop up and conduct these inspections of your home to detect and see if a man was there. They would also look at anything you had in your home that seemed relatively new, because if you had money to buy, or if you had the funds to buy something new, or you had the funds to afford something that they thought that you shouldn't be able to afford, that was a violation of that policy.
See, I
So
believe that black exploitation movies and Good Times and Claudine and
mhm,
Superfly and all of those movies were just like how we view The Help, The Butler, Harriet.
they were.
You know what I mean? 10 years, 12 years a slave.
Mhm.
We're looking at those movies like, dang, every time we turn around. And they were probably looking at those movies the same way,
They
because here
did.
we are trying. Okay, yeah.
They did look at them the same way. It was the same way because, again, my point was they didn't want to be reminded of some very real shit that they were going through at the time. Because while it was on television, art was imitating life. And that's what made it so
That,
good.
yes, yes, yes. And so
And
even though we had Flint, we had Detroit, we Harlem was on the decline, but we still had very strong black epicenters like DC. We still had parts of LA. We still had Houston. Atlanta, what we didn't get there until about the 90s, but we still had strong black communities. You know what I mean? At that time.
yes.
So when this came on, it was like, here we go. Good
Hmm.
times. And I mean,
Hmm.
even the uh opening song is like, really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Really?
The opening was a mother. But yeah, I think that's what it was in a lot of instances. It was them reminding us of some things that we want to forget. But the power is not in forgetting. The power is in overcoming and never going back. Like when you hear the Jews say never again, like they went through, well, with the exception of our Holocaust, with the exception of what we've been through as a people, I would say the Jewish community had the most monstrous Holocaust to happen to them of the modern era. But what they did, instead of them trying to forget the Holocaust, they just said never again. That was fuel, that was inspiration, that was motivation for them to say, look, we're never going back. we're never going back to what we used to be. We're never going back to where we came from. So now we're going to work to have a share of the wealth of this society to ensure that we're protected, to ensure that we never go back again. Whereas with black folks, it was like, oh, I don't want to see that. Get it away. Get it away. Get it
And
away. I don't want to see it.
Bill Cosby came on the scene because I want to talk about Sean's comment. And Bill Cosby came on the scene saying, enough with the whole sob story images of black people. He came from the I Spy image. So now that's going way, way back. That's even before my time. I
Right.
Spy, okay. He was doing interracial shows before that was even commonplace. So he was
Okay.
like, enough of that. Let me go. Forget who he was banging. Let me go create an image of a black family that is upper middle class, that is a good image. And he still met with pushback. And so now, honestly, with everything that's happening to Bill Cosby, it left the screen and it went into personal life, because it's like, how could you uppity ninja, present this positive image to these people? We like Good Times. Y'all need to watch Good Times. Why
Well,
are y'all watching Cosby Show? It was something for us to work towards. You know what I
exactly.
mean?
Exactly. While I'm here, I want to correct two. I want to correct two because I am looking at the chat somewhat. Mr. Sean Brown says, "Fam, the kicking out of fathers doesn't even happen today. What happens is when women have the option of dealing with a man and his rules or just getting them money." Okay, all right. I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm not, I was giving a historical perspective of welfare. So there's no disagreement with that. I'm not even going to deal with that. All right. The next one was Mr. Glass says, guess who made money off Good Times? And the creator, Sinai Lathan, is her father. The creator of Good Times was Eric Monty, not Sinai Lathan's father. The man who created Good Times is a man by the name of Eric Monty, not Sinai Lathan. Okay, so let me go back to what you said. Yes, the Cosby Show was something for us to aspire to, but even with that, they said that that was they couldn't relate to that. So even though you were given something to aspire to, the people that were used to struggling couldn't relate to prosperity.
Mr. Maceo, can we rewind now? One of my other favorite shows. I know you a Fred Sanford aficionado.
Oh yeah,
Um,
Fred Sanford is my boy.
we'll talk about his fatherhood skills as well. But another father that I constantly break down Jeffersons, especially when I'm teaching femininity. Y'all like femininity in the Jeffersons? Oh yes, how we treat our men, how black men were portrayed. George Jefferson was the opposite of kind of not the direct opposite of James, but he came from humble beginnings. He wasn't raised with his father. I don't know if James was or not. I think
Let,
his
what, let me run through that and I'll tell you. James Evans was a product of the Great Depression. He was a child of the Mississippi Delta. His father abandoned the family looking for work. They were sharecroppers in the cotton fields of Mississippi. He was semi-literate. He went into the military because back then, and I still think today, you don't have to have a high school diploma to join the military. James Evans joined the military. He joined the military during the period of Korea. He was 18 years old, 18 or 19. He did his tour in Korea, got out, and married Florida Evans. And that's where they had those children. Now, George Jefferson came from the ghettos of East Harlem. He was the son of a working poor or working class family from the ghettos of East Harlem. He didn't even have a high school diploma, but he went into business for himself and
he
George hit
went
a
to the
lick and he
Navy.
came up.
He went to the
Yes.
Navy, right? And
Yep,
see, there's
that's
a
correct.
common theme with the military and black men,
Mhm.
but I digress.
The military was a way to escape poverty, and it's a way to
Hmm.
escape poverty
I
today. But
wish a
again,
black YouTuber, to all the male YouTubers that are listening, I wish y'all would do, is the black man, should they be looking to the military as a way to kind of, start life? I don't know. I think that there's a common theme that George was successful.
mhm,
And James he was not economically successful, what we consider successful, but he was straight and narrow.
he
So I mean,
was.
or are we looking at that? But anyway, I digress. But the point I was trying to make with George Jefferson was he didn't get respect. He came from humble beginnings, just like George, but he was wealthy. So even though James is in the hood and he had all this respect, George took his family from what, Queens? Where was it? Was
Harlem.
Queens?
What they were from Queens, but that was a middle class neighborhood in Queens. He took them from the middle class on up to the deluxe apartment in the
Right,
sky.
and he could never get respect. If y'all look at George Jefferson, he never now he was obnoxious, but that was a play on All in the Family character because they were a spinoff of All in the Family. So they were trying to make spoofs of me. They were really playing on masculinity if you really want to get deep with it. And George was just the other aspect of where they was attacking black masculinity. All right. But George, it sent the message to black men and black fathers that no matter how successful you are not entitled to respect. Now, Louise, okay, is overweight. Okay, she's living. I'm just, let's keep it real. I mean, she didn't look like Helen, and here she is popping off at the mouth to George. And come on, let's just be 100. If that was today, George wouldn't have been putting up with that. But that's what they put in our face. So we wonder why some women are just sassy and doing whatever, because we learned that. We watched Jefferson's growing up. That's why I tell the Generation Xers, look, it's hard working with y'all because we are so ingrained with that. We watched Florida buck up to James. We watched Louise buck up to George. You know what I'm saying? Like, really? Even Fresh Prince's wife, Fresh Prince,
Vivian,
yeah, even she bucked up to her husband several
Phil,
times. Yeah.
yeah, and Elizabeth probably would have bucked up to Fred, but she was dead. So
I mean,
he
well, you had Aunt Esther, so
on Esther.
there you
So
go.
Fred Sanford was also in the military. He also served during World War II.
Game Changer said, "How can you not forget Florence?" Like,
How can
yeah,
you not get
absolutely.
Florence?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
So, but yeah, remembering who these black people, what are their character biographies? Their character biographies tells you a lot about the times. It tells you a lot about the people. It tells you a lot about the culture, and it tells you a lot of times about your own family, because we had people in our families that are. Uh, uh, I don't want to say replicas, that are symbols of people. Those people that you see on the screen were symbols of real life people that we had in our families. Because again, the military was a way out for a lot of black men during that era, because during that period, if you were a criminal, you had the option of either going to the military or going to prison.
We need to
That was
bring
a
that back for black boys.
that was
Sis,
a
don't
real
don't put them
option.
in jail. Send them to the military. I'm
That
sorry.
that was a real option. But the thing here is that what we have to remember is that each one of these characters represent all of these characters represent black people at a time of struggle, whether it be in Cabrini Green projects. Because even though George was on top, even though George was wealthy, George, in some sense, in some instances, still, even though he ran his own business, he still wasn't totally sovereign. He was constantly
Nope.
to kowtow to Mr. Whitendale,
Yep.
the
And
man
they
who owned the
constantly,
building.
that was a subliminal message to black men that no matter what you do, how successful you are, you can move your family wherever you want, because let's even then, Manhattan is, you've arrived. If you
Hmm.
live in Manhattan, you've arrived. That's
Hmm.
it. I live in Buckhead. That's all well and good, but it ain't nothing compared to Manhattan. So he took the message they were trying to say is, as a black man, see, you got to really watch, you got to pay attention to what y'all watching, what y'all ingesting into your system, you all. What they were sending to black men was that no matter what you do, we still gonna tear you down. You can move your family to the penthouse or whatever. You can have businesses. You can make your wife wealthy. You can send your children to the best school. But at the end of the day, you still don't get respect. You still have to ask for respect from, and this is why every time he slammed the door in front of what's the doorman's face, I just laughed. I was like,
Ralph,
yes.
Ralph,
Yeah,
the
Ralph.
man that was constantly trying to touch him for money.
I was like,
You know,
yes,
you
get
know,
him.
Mr. J, I held this suit especially for you. I said that Mr. J was a good guy. Yes, sir. And he had his hand out the entire time. He was constantly begging for tips. But there was something that was even more fundamental to me. Um, there was something that was even more fundamental to me. There was a universal lesson that George Jefferson taught, that maybe James didn't get a chance to understand, or didn't get a chance, because James had hit a lick. When he got killed off that show, he had actually hit a lick. He had actually opened a business in Mississippi. And so now he was calling for his family to come back from back from Chicago to Mississippi. And it reminds me of what's going on now with the ATL. You have a large influx of Black people now leaving Chicago, leaving Detroit, leaving
Yes, it's a
Harlem,
large
and they're coming.
population of
Yeah,
New Yorkers down
mhm,
here, and Detroit. It's a lot of folks from Detroit, and it's a lot of people from Chicago and Atlanta.
yeah.
A lot, a
So
lot.
once upon a time, we used to break south and head north. Now we breaking north and coming back south. You see. So, but my point with George was the comparison between George and James was that George was saying, okay, it's rough at the bottom, but it's really rough at the top, because
Right.
his place wasn't assured at the top. He had to constantly keep hustling. He had to constantly keep getting new accounts. And these weren't Black people that were giving him his business. These were white
And
people.
can I take it here? I'm gonna go here, Maceo, because I know that's why we so good together on these panels, because you know exactly where I'm gonna go. Helen was so submissive to what's his name? Fat man?
Tom,
Tom.
Tom,
Okay,
yeah.
I know my memory crazy. Helen was so submissive to Tom, but Louise popped off at George. Go.
Well, because Helen, you know how it is. Black women have a deference for white men, unfortunately, and I know why they have that deference. But there's a deference because white men, in a very, very real sense, psychologically, they represent power. Black women know that white men have a degree of power in this society, and women will always submit and yield to power. There's a saying that power is the greatest aphrodisiac, and that is true. Any man can bend. Anything, or especially women, I won't say anything. Men can especially bend women to their will if they're powerful. If a man has enough power and he has enough wealth, he can speak softly and everybody will listen.
But
It's a lot
technically,
easier that way.
George was more successful than Tom.
Well, George was more successful than Tom, but see, George was in their world. See, yeah,
Mm,
he was one nigga. He was
okay.
one nigga surrounded by a bunch of affluent white people. See, Tom is one of them. See, it's different when you're one of them and coming to the Black community, as opposed to the Black community, being from the Black community and going up there and dealing with a situation where there are very few Black people in power. That's a very, very
Mhm,
insecure
image.
situation,
Mhm,
you
mhm,
know. So here's this one Black dude up there among all these other white dudes, and all these other white people are necessary for him
mhm.
to maintain and increase the wealth that he has. So in a very real sense, even though he makes more money than them, the levers of power on the distribution of wealth is
Mm,
unequal, and the
mm,
levers of power are unequal. So even though he hit a lick and come up, he doesn't have the same clout as the man who owns the apartment building.
mm,
See, George owned
mm,
7 dry cleaners,
mhm,
7 dry cleaners all over New York City.
mhm,
Whitdale owned buildings on Park Place,
gotcha.
you see. So the
Hmm.
distribution of wealth and power was inequitable or unequal. So even though George hit a lick and he was more successful than Mr. Bentley, which is the man that worked at the UN next door, the man whose back he had to stand on,
Right.
even though he was wealthier than Ralph the doorman, even though he was wealthier than Tom Willis, George had to deal and he had to exist in an environment where white men that did not come from East Harlem were the majority.
Now, don't you think that played on the psyche of Generation X men? And don't you think Louise popping off, Helen popping off, and Florence popping off at George did not send Generation Xers subliminal messages that you don't have to respect a Black man? This is why I go so hard in the paint against Generation Xers, because we've been programmed. We've been programmed since we were children, because we grew up watching Sanford and Son, George, the Jeffersons. We grew up watching Good Times. We grew up watching Claudine. We grew up with that. And then, boom, guess what else hit us in the 80s? We had Oprah Winfrey.
Hmm.
Okay, so that's what we grew up. So that's why we it's so hard dealing with Generation X women. We really have to work the hardest
Mhm.
because it's in our system and we may not even realize it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. I think it was very much the symbol that the very much this idea that the black man couldn't be in charge of anything, that you couldn't be in charge of, you weren't worthy of respect because no one has ever seen a black man running anything. No one has ever seen, because come on, this is America. I mean, we're what
We saw athletes and
we
that's
saw,
about it.
and that was
Yeah.
it. The extent of your power was athletes and entertainers. So they didn't think that a black man could run anything that had anything to do with
They
any
made
brain power.
Georgia clown. They made
Yes,
Georgia
they
clown.
made him
Yeah.
a clown, but he was actually a brilliant businessman. So it was something I was going to say, but I forgot it. But anyway, there's an excellent essay by Dr. Huey P. Newton, the late Dr. Huey P. Newton. It was called Penis Envy, and he talks about this process that originated in slavery. And he talked about how the process of slavery stripped the black man of his mind by placing him in a subservient role, but it likewise stripped the white man of his body by placing him in the role of an administrator. So you overdefine or you overdevelop the black man's body by making him beast of burden, and underdevelop the white man's body by making him the wielder of the pen. It makes him kind of effeminate. So what I'm saying here is that that imagery comes from that kind of analysis. Okay, a black man can't do anything but X, Y, and Z. So if he's powerful, he has to be in music or entertainment. And if he's it's music or sports, and if he's in music and sports, he has to be an athlete. He can never own the team. When I was coming up, my favorite team was the Boston Celtics. My father liked the Los Angeles Lakers because he saw uh, Magic, Kareem, James Worthy,
Right.
Byron Scott.
Yes,
He saw
yes.
all those
AC
guys out there.
Green.
He liked them, AC Green.
Yes.
I liked the Boston Celtics. And the reason I liked the Boston Celtics was because they had a black head coach. The Boston Celtics had a black head coach.
See, now you going somewhere deep with us. See,
So,
that's what I'm talking
uh,
about. Now you know we got to do a show on that. That got
yeah,
to be an all male panel where y'all talk
right.
about the evolution of black men in sports. That'd
Right.
be awesome.
But the point is, going back to our point, was that the black man wasn't worthy of any respect because they didn't see him in any position of they didn't see black men that called any shots. The only place where black men called any shots was in the streets. And that's why
Oh,
you get a lot of black
okay.
women that look up to the ghost, because that's the only place where a black man had some modicum of freedom, where he
From
lived
Power?
by from
You talking
power,
about okay.
from ghost from power. That was the only place where they saw a black man calling his own shots, where he lived in an area to where he didn't answer to anybody. Now, of course, it's more nuanced to that, and that's actually not true, but that's their perception. They think that the black criminal, the successful black criminal, is free.
This is
He's
why they
free.
loved what's his name that passed away. Hustle.
Uh,
You know what I'm talking about.
Nipsey Hussle. Nipsey
Right.
Hussle.
Mm-hmm.
This idea that the black criminal or that the black gangster is free, and if they understood how the streets actually run, and they understand the inner working of the criminal justice system with the streets, they would see that the black gangster is the most enslaved and intertwined person out there. Actually, he's the bottom feeder in the system. He is not the super predator. He is not the alpha male. He's actually just another victim. But because we don't give that analysis, we don't see the interrelationship between the system and the criminal. We just see him with the flashy shit, with the nigga trinkets. We see him with the nigga 300, with the nigga Corvette, the Dodge 300 with the big ass rims, or we see him with that's in somebody else's name, by the way. That's
Do we?
in
Is that
somebody
why?
else's name.
But is that why? And I'm not making excuses. I want to talk about it, and I hope maybe the chat can help me out here. But do you think that that's why a lot of women don't respect or appreciate the masculine perspective in the home? Because we saw the breakdown of the father literally on TV in front of us.
Yes, that's very much what happened. But also, we didn't just see it on TV, we saw it in the home because we went through the crack generation. The crack generation deteriorated us. It shattered us. So what little was there, what you saw on TV, art is imitating life. Okay, so they're sitting there looking at a James Evans, but ain't no James Evans in their home. They sitting there looking at a Uncle Phil. Ain't no Uncle Phil in their home.
So wait a
That
minute, we've devolved from
yes,
good times.
we've devolved. We
So
are
they had a better
devolving.
situation
They had a better situation in
than we
Cabrini
have
Green
now.
projects than we have now from a social standpoint,
Wow.
from a civilized standpoint. Because see, James Evans drew the line at his door. James Evans drew the line at his door. He said, look, teenage pregnancy is not going to come in this house. Drugs is not going to come in this house. Gang violence is not going to come in this house. Alcoholism is not going to come in this house. Criminal conduct is not going to come in this house. You're going to go to school. You're going to excel. You're going to achieve. My son is going to, Michael is going to be an attorney. Thelma is going to be whatever she want to be. And Junior, okay, Junior, you're not going to be a scholar, but you're not going to sit around here after you graduate. He even took his ass to art school. So even JJ got into secondary education.
So you know
You know,
what? Somebody in the chat said us deeper than that, it goes back to the plantation. For some people, yes, but you can't erase Detroit and Harlem and parts of LA and Houston. You can't erase that black people were on the up. You can't erase Black Wall Street and what's that city in Haiti or the
Little
area in North.
Haiti
Yes, you
in
can't
Florida.
erase Black Miami. You can't
Mhm.
erase that Black people were successful in pockets around the nation. You can't erase that.
Yes.
So, that argument that it all goes back to slavery, I just,
Well, no, because
nah.
I can understand where they're coming from. The ethos, the attitudes comes from slavery, but then we fought against that. And so we had Black Wall Street. So we really can't, we can argue about the effects, we can argue about the attitudes, but we achieved in spite of. So we can't stay there. We achieved, and during Reconstruction, there were more Black politicians than anywhere in the country. That's actually why they
That's
overturned
what I'm saying.
Reconstruction, of
Like that
course.
argument is
Uh,
bunk. Like
you know,
I
we
can't.
built prosperous towns during Reconstruction.
Yeah, yeah.
So you can't say that that was necessarily the case. Okay, I certainly understand the effects and so forth and so on. LAR said we went from Vietnam to heroin to, I think he said, to crime to crack. He's exactly right. It was an evolutionary process and it took an effect on our communities. But at the same time, you had a lot of other things happening. Uh, and then someone else says, then the mortgage crisis, which was the next stripping. You guys should actually go to the Negro Manosphere and we read some of my articles that I actually wrote up there that I know you guys haven't read, that I know you guys probably won't read, because I've talked about these subjects. I talked about the stripping away of Black wealth through mortgage, through the land contract schemes. I've talked about these things. So go back there and read that. So I'm not going to go off on a tangent on that. But yes, we have actually devolved as a society since good times. We have gotten technologically smarter, but we have become more socially retarded. It seems like the more that we have become tech savvy, for every degree we've gained in technological savvy and knowledge, we've lost in social, in
And
society and civilization. So
let me also add, okay, no dig at the younger generations, but our parents pushed us to have a personality. There was no such thing. I don't care how hot it was. There was no such thing as you staying in the house all day doing nothing, watching TV and playing video games. You had to go out, which meant you made friends, which meant you got exercise, you got sun, you had to develop a personality. So going to a party wasn't scary to you. We didn't have cell phones to look at the whole party. Generation X and boomers, mainly Generation X, you either had or personality or you just was whack because you just couldn't survive without a personality. Let's look at the Good Times kids. Michael could sing, Thelma
mhm,
could dance,
mhm.
and even
JJ could
Dodo
paint.
could paint.
Mhm,
They had talent and they had
mhm.
personalities. Each one of them
Yes.
had unique personalities. These kids don't have personalities.
Well, there was also the thing of parents understood that kids they could develop and grow, but they still had to be kids. See, when I was coming up, my mother and father said, "No, you're gonna sit your ass in this house under grown folks. Get out there in the streets. You don't need to be sitting here looking in a
Go
grown person's
play.
mouth.
Yeah,
Go
go play.
play.
Hmm.
Get out there in the streets." So there was this impetus to say, "Look, you're a child. You need to stay in a child's place." Whereas now today, the parents sit down and talk to the children as though the children are their equal. They sit down and gossip with their kids like the kids is one of their homeboys or their homegirls or their besties, you know. So the very rules, the very code of conduct, the very way we conduct our families is imploding. Okay. So again, these things happened. These
And
things
and
happened or
and
did
I
happen.
think and I think the Cosby Show was a devolution from, is that a word? A
Hmm.
development
It
from,
is. Evolution is a word. Go ahead.
from Good Times, because Florida was a stay-at-home mom. And when they came home from school, guess what she said? Go do your homework. She was
Yep.
working on dinner,
Hmm.
right?
Well, yes, it was, but that's a situation to where okay, now everybody has to pitch in to help, but there's no traditional gender roles there. And that was the one criticism I had about the Cosby Show, is that they tried to get away from gender roles. If you remember the one episode when Elvin said to Cliff, he's like, "Oh, she's gonna get you a glass of
Mhm.
milk." Well, I don't get him a glass of milk. I don't serve him.
That,
I get
yeah.
him a cup of coffee just like he gets me a cup of coffee. And she was all, sassy and slick mouth with it and stuff like that. And then when it was over, she was all emasculating to him. And he was like, well, maybe I better get you a cup of coffee. You see, that type of sassy that was the one thing I didn't like. How they went out of the way. That was, to me, that was like feminism run amok. I get what they're saying. Women want to be respected. I got that part. But it was just like at times they went extra with that shit. They went
She
overboard with
actually
that shit.
treated him like a child sometimes.
She did. She did. She did.
And
So,
it took a man to point that out. Like, Nicole, I'm a fan of yours, but you might not want to use Claire Huxtable. And I was like, why? When he broke that down to me, even and the point that he made to me was the episode when Denise brought a boyfriend home.
mhm,
The what's his name, Christophe St. John, that
yeah,
episode when she brought him to dinner, and
yeah,
he was crass, and he said something to Claire, and she kind of nice nasty did the whole feminist
yeah,
snap back, and I was like, oh
yeah.
yeah, dang, I can't use Claire anymore. And he made the point that took a man to point that out to me, because I'm like, I mean, because we Generation Xers, that was our example of femininity. What else did we have? Oprah.
Yeah. I
We
mean,
had
she was
Mary
the
Tyler.
closest thing.
We had Mary
What?
Tyler Moore.
Well, yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
And the other form of femininity you didn't want, the late Nell Carter and Give Me a Break, and that was more of a
Oh my
manly.
God, I went off on her,
So,
and people got in. You know what? People got in their feelings about that because of her looks and things like that. It wasn't a jab at her looks, but that was a jab at stereotype. But anyway, we ain't talking about women. We talking about fathers. But yeah, yeah. So I think she treated Cliff like a child at times. And so now that I look at, because I watched the Thanksgiving episode for the Cosby Show, when he was going out, he kept going out in the rain to get stuff. she
yeah,
didn't, she didn't really show any appreciation. She was real ungrateful and bossy. And I was like, ooh, you know what I mean? But she was the
yeah.
best we had, you know?
Well, at the time, she was trying to be as feminine as she could, but even uh, that was kind of rough. Somebody in the chat room said Rudy was emasculating the Kenny. Yep, Rudy was emasculating the Kenny. Exactly. Sketch 1001 said Rudy was emasculating the Kenny. Yeah, yeah, she was. So you tended to see that. The only one that seemed to be a bit feminine was Denise. She was the one that was probably the most feminine of all the
Mm-hmm.
kids.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that it was a very interesting thing, because again, Florida, if I had a choice of moms, it would have been Florida Evans. It would have been Florida Evans. Because again, Generation X, we came from it wasn't perfect. It wasn't that way in every case, but that was the last vestiges of traditional values that we had.
Claire to me was she was pushing this whole, and I broke this down to my feminine elite ladies. I said Claire was kind of impossible. And that's what a lot of modern women are doing, including myself, trying to do it all. Have a job, come home and take care of a house full of people, including your
Mhm.
man, and then and if you notice at the end of the episode, Claire was always smiling. She was
Mhm.
always receptive to Cliff. That's not real life. Okay, if she
Yeah.
worked at a law firm and me and you work in the legal field, and so while it's not physically grueling, it's mentally grueling.
It
So,
definitely is.
so a woman doing that all day, then having to switch gears, come home and take care of 5 children and a husband, and then you still turn up at the end of the night. Not many women can do that. I'm sorry. And I tell women, you know what, Generation X, we grew up thinking we could be Claire Huxtable. Subconsciously, we thought we could pull that off. In reality, the divorce rates say otherwise. And I'm, on my own platform, I'm reintroducing the stay-at-home mom feature, and I'm getting pushback. But the numbers reflect the Florida Evans way was more successful than the Claire Huxtable way. What you think?
Right. Well, I think, yeah, Florida Evans is definitely going to come back in style, and that's what's missing. See, we slipped up when we went too far into feminism. See, we can support the equality of women getting the same work for same pay if they're doing the same job. That didn't mean that it had to extend into questioning gender roles. Now you're going a little bit too far. But the left and liberals tend to go a little bit too far. They constantly go a little bit
But you
too
know what,
far.
Maceo? Somebody made a great comment in the comment section.
What they say?
LAR. Ironically, Cliff was the one who could run a business and take care of the kids. Did you
Yes.
notice? And I just thank you, LAR. He was the one that had the at-home business, and he
Hmm.
was the one available for the kids. And Claire was the one that went out to the office. Y'all see that? Do y'all see how that was playing on us subconsciously?
Yeah.
Don't y'all
Yeah.
get it now that the woman, we are trained to go out into the workforce and be workhorses? Y'all don't see that?
Mm.
Wow.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and he was a woman's doctor, so it was almost
He
like
was an
he was
OBGYN. Yeah.
we
Yeah.
having game run on us and we didn't even realize it. That's
Yeah. Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. But getting back to, because we're gonna keep going on this, but we're going back to the LAR's student loans is going to be the rebirth of Florida Evans. You damn right.
Amen. I ain't
You
lying.
damn right.
Shoot, you ain't never
But
lied.
anyway, going back to this biography on James now. Again, James Evans worked 2 jobs. He was a dishwasher in one place and he worked at the car wash in another. He worked 16 hours a day. Now, the thing was is he always, they said that he could never get a job. That's not true. James always had a job. He just didn't have a job that paid worth anything. So at the 4th season was the season he got killed off, was when he had actually bought into a business down south. In other words, James had hit a lick. James had finally got the bag. He had finally come up. And when he came up, he died. So James Evans died being a father. He died being a husband. He died doing what he was supposed to do. Now, of course, everybody here knows about the contractual negotiations and why he got kicked off. So I won't go into that or belabor that point. But the point here is that what James wanted for his family, what George wanted for Wheezy and Lionel, and what Cliff had for Claire and his 5 children. So just because James lived in poverty didn't mean that he wanted to stay there. James he wanted the same dream that Cliff had. He wanted the same dream that Uncle Phil had. He wanted the same dream that George had, because that's what you do when you're a father. That's what you are about when you're a father. It's always about generational wealth and making sure your children have advantages that you didn't have when you were a child. That's the role of a father. That's the role of marriage. That's the role of traditional values. A Negro once asked me, "Why do you need a family?" And I'm not going to call his name either. But this is why you need a family. That's the purpose of having a damn family. That's why you have a family, to preserve, protect, and promote the prosperity of your lineage. So, anyway, somebody said the same with Joe Jackson. Yeah, Joe Jackson has gotten a bad name. Joe Jackson has gotten a bad rep. Who in here, well, in Generation X, those of us who had fathers, who had a father that didn't whoop their ass?
Don't remind me. Because I was popping off at the mouth, so I got popped quite
You
often.
know, who had a father that didn't whoop their ass? Who didn't have who if your father was in the home, who had a father that didn't give them a generous amount of strap time? So when James Evans popped that belt, you understood what he meant. When he gave you that look, when JJ said something dumb and he gave you that look, every black kid knows what that look means. Every black child knows what that look means. They understand the implications of that look. And you also understand the benefits, the consequences, and the repercussions of that look. And you begin to appreciate that look the older you get in life. And you miss that look when they're gone.
Man, I mean the values he instilled in me, I thought he was being rough because I thought the girls without dads always get to go out. They always get to be on the phone past 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, and I have to get off the phone at 10 because it's a school night, that sort of thing. I can't go out. I can't hang out. I can't go out to the parties. And now really the Bible is really true to his word. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he's old he will not depart from it. I'm old and I still do what my daddy said do. Don't be out certain times of night. I mean, it's sort of like it's instilled in me, and some of the stuff that I thought he was overboard with, I'm teaching on my channel. So I think the importance of fathers is just so underrated, like in our community.
It is underrated. But you see, when you look at the community and you see the devolution of the community, you see the value of having a father. And when you see the value of having a father, you see the value of having a two-parent household, and you see the value of marriage, and you see the value of family. And that's what these little sycophants that you hear on YouTube have gotten away from. They've become maladjusted to dysfunction. They've become maladjusted to abnormality. So a lot of these niggas that you hear on YouTube, pay no attention to them. Pay no attention to them. You know, a lot of these guys gonna end up in old folks' homes, shitting on themselves, being abused by STNA/strippers who hate their jobs anyway.
Wait a minute, Maceo. So who, because I want to talk about, because I wasn't a Family Matters fan. I'm just going to be real with y'all. I didn't really
Hmm.
watch that show. I didn't really get
Hmm.
into that. But which father do you think out of all the TV dads, because I know you're a Fred Sanford fan,
Hmm.
he wasn't my favorite father. I'm going to tell you that right now. I didn't really watch Family Matters. I did like Uncle Carl. Is that
Hmm.
was Uncle Phil? I'm sorry. I
Uncle
did
Phil.
like Uncle Phil. George was a little brash. So I mean, who do you think would be a good example of a good father now?
Who I think would be an example of a good father. But here's what I'm saying. I think all of them were good fathers. I think all of them were good fathers. There's no one over the other because all of them had the same trait: protect and provide. Every single one of them. Every single one of them. James, Cliff, Uncle Phil, Carl Winslow, all of them had the same fire. They had the same flavor. They had the same Kool-Aid. It's the same. It's just in different households and through different experiences. So there is no superiority of one father over the next. So I couldn't pick one because I like all of them. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. I'm trying to. Did Rock have children?
Well, Eleanor got pregnant at the end of the season, but he didn't raise any
Okay.
children. And I'm sorry, they adopted Kim Fields. Kim Fields' sister, I forget what her name
Hmm.
is.
Hmm.
Heavy D's daughter. They adopted Heavy D's daughter. Um, I forget what her name was. They adopted her on the show, so they were raising her. But no, she
There
didn't
were
have any
other
kids until
shows
later
as
season.
well. Didn't Robert Townsend have a show? And
The
didn't
Parenthood, the
okay,
Parenthood.
didn't
Mhm.
wasn't Lisa Ray, the two of us, with
I didn't like that shit.
okay.
I didn't like that shit. Yeah, I saw it. I did not like that
So when
shit.
we start getting
You know.
modern, but modern dads,
Yeah,
we
because
start
now
doing
they
that.
going away from all that shit. Two mamas and two daddies, and I don't want to deal with that shit. I don't want
What
that shit.
about the wife and kids? My wife and kids.
Now I did like that. I did like that.
What about the Blackish?
Blackish is okay, but the thing is with Blackish, he had, like most of us do. A lot of times we have issues with our fathers because we don't really understand them, and we don't really understand the era and the time that they grew up in. So there's a misunderstanding of that. So
And Sanford, to his credit, Fred Sanford did start a business that
Fritz,
Lamont could inherit. I'll
yeah,
give
he
him his
I
credit.
left this empire for you. That's right. God damn it. Get off, Fred. I built this empire for you.
I mean, there's a common theme. James
Mm-hmm.
went down south to start a business,
Mm-hmm.
okay, and he died. But George started a business and left it to his son.
Mm-hmm.
What's his face? Sanford started a business for Lamont to inherit.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Uncle Phil was a judge who could,
Mm-hmm.
so he didn't have a business to pass down,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm pretty sure once he started a law firm, that
But
would have
all
been,
of these guys, though, were aiming for generational wealth. You see
yep,
that?
yep, common
All of these
theme.
guys were
Yep.
aiming towards generational wealth. George Macon, it's all your fault. It's all your fault, George Macon. George Macon asked who whipped ass the most. George, we know that. We know that James whipped ass the most. You ain't got to ask no question. You already know the answer to that. You
When he
know
beat up that
James
little boy that
whipped
was
ass.
bullying Michael, I was
Yeah,
like, "Oh
he
Lord
said, "Come in
Jesus!"
here." He said, "James, don't go overboard." You know the boy got it coming. You can hear his ass in the pow, pow. No, 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 pow. Sound just like a
See, you
black
couldn't
man.
you couldn't do that on TV now
No,
at
you couldn't.
all,
No,
at
you
all.
couldn't. Hell, you even play that on TV, somebody called the police on you. So, but yeah, he lit that little boy's ass up, you know. And then he was like, "I hope that make you feel good." He said, "Didn't make me feel bad."
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know. So, all of them were aiming toward um generational wealth, and all of them were interested in making sure that their families grew up happy and well adjusted,
Mhm.
you know, and so forth and so on. Albert brought up an excellent uh, thing here. He said, Penny's mama whooped ass. That's an example of when
That
a
is
single parent
abuse.
mother is abusive. She didn't just whoop her ass, she burned her with an iron, she broke her damn arm, you know. The child had a band-aid on her forehead and so forth and
Yeah,
so on.
broke
So
arm and ribs and
yeah,
teeth.
yeah.
Yeah, okay.
That's a little
That's
bit different, you know,
right. But
than
that
than
it is
anything
an
else.
example. That is an example of a mother who doesn't want their kid.
Exactly. Because she didn't want her child.
Mhm.
She didn't,
Mhm.
you know.
She did not want Penny.
She did not want
And
Penny.
it's funny how Walona got Penny and she actually passed on Mr. Mason who wanted to marry Walona. Walona had a
Yes.
chance to secure the bag and passed on it. There was one feminist episode with Walona. Y'all go watch that. I think it's the fifth or sixth episode where she told Frank he was trying to marry her. And he bought the business. So basically, Walona would have been owning the boutique that she had been working in all those years. Frank bought the boutique and she said, "You trying to control me," and declined Frank's offer. I was yelling. I was like, "Why didn't I catch this years ago?"
Frank
But
was like,
as a
Frank was like,
40-ish
look
woman,
here,
I'm like,
I'm
I
making
get it.
things easy for you, woman, and all I get is lip.
Yep,
I
yep,
was
yep.
like, tell her, but she's one of these women,
That
sisters are
was
doing it for
feminism.
herself, and you trying to control
That was
me. And,
feminism being ingrained in us, y'all. I mean, because
yeah,
that was the height of the feminist movement, right? Was the 70s. And
the
that was when,
70s. Yeah.
so Walona's character was basically in single mother mode. I can do it. I don't need no man. I got it. I got it. I got it. And here come Frank, who's the black, I got the bag, baby. I'm good looking. I own my own business. I got money. You ain't got to work. I'm going to take care of you and your baby. That's not mine. And she told you trying to control me. Does that sound familiar, anybody? Does that sound familiar? But I understood it now but I didn't understand it when I was watching it as a young woman. And that's what I'm trying to tell people about Generation X. Although y'all fuss at us hard, you got to understand what we've been watching for years. This has been ingrained in us since we've been programmed, literally. So although it's like talking to a brick wall with a Generation X woman, we literally have to work the hardest coming back to our femininity because it's been ingrained. Understanding the importance of James Evans is important. Ask a woman. Here's a test, Mr. Maceo. Do you think fellas can understand where a woman stands with femininity if a man asks her, which part of Good Times did you like best? When James was there or after James left? What do you think? Is that a good question for fellas to ask the women?
That's a good question. That is a damn good question. That's a damn good question. So now that becomes my question, ladies. We don't, you done halfway prodded them. So maybe that was probably not the question to ask. Now we done let the cat out the bag. But
We
here's an
gave them
excellent.
the answers to the test.
They done, they can figure out the answer. So that's probably not a good one. Devin said when James was there, you know, and now they're going into a different world and so forth and so on. But anyway, yeah, the thing here is what I wanted to do today was to give an analysis between Cliff Huxtable and James Evans. Okay. Of course, we know that they were different. Now, Cliff Huxtable was born in Philadelphia to a father that was a World War II veteran and a mother that was a stay-at-home mother. Cliff Huxtable's mother was a stay-at-home mother. His father graduated from a historically black college and university. Of course, there's no Hillman University. That was a symbol for Hampton University, Norfolk State University, and all the other ones. So he was a child. Also, he was a child of that period of the Great Depression, the World War II. So he came of age during that period, but he was college educated, you know, and of course he became a doctor. And one of the things that, if you really wanted to see this vein of bigotry and racism that is consistent, see, when you're at the bottom, everything hurts when you're at the bottom. Everything hurts when you're at the bottom. Uh, Racism hurts really hard when you're at the bottom. But there was an episode on the Cosby Show that showed that, they had to deal with the same thing too. And it was an episode that I had mixed feelings about it because again it promoted Claire Huxtable in this sort of masculine vibe where Cliff was on the sideline, and that was the episode to where she was debating these white historians on TV, and they were talking about a book about John Kenneth Galbraith, and I forget the name of the book. I think it was The Great Society by John Kenneth Galbraith, and they were debating the books, and they were debating about the period of the Great Depression. And you had the liberal on there, who was you saw the liberal on there who was exhibiting, that enlightened liberal racism, and then you saw the outright conservative who was really bigoted, and then the moderate who was bigoted but not as bigoted as the conservative. And so she was on there, battling with them and arguing with them and showing them up. And so it kind of had Cliff on the sideline where his wife is sitting here being, tossed around by these bigots. And that episode sort of showed you that even though they had overcame, even though they had made it didn't mean that the problems that James would experience or that Fred Sanford would experience or that even George Jefferson was experiencing went away. In other words, racism and bigotry didn't go away just because they had money. People still looked at them as being less than, even though they had money. So, do you remember that episode? Do you remember seeing that episode? Or
I don't remember that episode, but Claire had a lot of opportunities where she kind of bucked up with the nice nasty, her eyes got the bug in, but then
Mhm.
she had so many soft scenes. There was a scene where she called Cliff at the office because he worked from home,
Mm-hmm.
and she's at her job, and she's calling him speaking Spanish, saying I love you and I can't wait to see you. So she
Mm-hmm.
had so many soft. I think what Dr. Cosby was trying to do was show or give women this goal to aspire to. The problem is our divorce rates show that us being away from our children from home is actually not working in our best interest. Being away, not available for our husbands and our children, and the home is not working out. But Dr. Huxtable was very nurturing, which he was probably one of the more nurturing fathers out of all of them, right?
Yeah, he was. Yeah, he was. Well, except for the classic first episode where he did show a little bit of gangsterdom in his game, where he was talking to Theo about his grades, and he played that little game with him called Regular People. He
Uh-huh.
gave him this Monopoly money, and then he asked him, I never will forget. This is a cheap plug to my philosophy. He had like $200 left, and he asked Theo. Theo was like, I got all I need and I still have $200 left. And then
He was like, "You plan
Dr.
to have a
Huxtable said, "You
woman?"
plan to have a girlfriend?" He was like, "Definitely." He took the money out his hand, and there was nothing in there. Regular people. And so his thing is okay. Look, you're gonna try, and you're gonna try your hardest. I brought you in this world, and I'll take you out you know. So you saw flashes of his, masculine aggression as far as his children were concerned. You did see that. You didn't see it so much with the girls, but you definitely saw it with
Yeah, he
Theo.
now that's a good point. He did step up with Theo, especially about that earring. I
Hmm.
mean, that was a classic episode. Yeah, he did step up. But Claire was definitely the disciplinarian. With remember Denise in that car?
Yes, 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 yes. I
Oh
remember
my
that.
goodness. She
Uh,
told, I want this car. Y'all get on my nerves. I want this car. And Claire got her quickly together. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what he said, LAR. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my entire life. Everybody was expecting him to say something soft to Theo. And that's what he said. That's the dumbest thing I ever heard there again, that's a line from it. There was also one thing I did like about the Cosby Show as well. It celebrated not just family, it celebrated black love. The classic episode where the mother, where Heathcliff's or Cliff's mother and father,
Your
their,
anniversary.
their anniversary,
Mm-hmm.
and they played Ray Charles. The
Mm-hmm.
nighttime is the right time.
Hmm. I also like how Cliff, and this reminds me of my dad, but he was gone by the time I met my ex-husband. But he was very, very protective when it came to ninjas. And um remember how Cliff treated Elvin when he dropped out of medical school? It was like
Yeah,
every time Elvin said something, he just rolled his eyes like, And then
yeah,
she had just gave birth to the twins, and he was like, I'm announcing that I'm going back to medical school. And everybody was like, Yay, Elvin. And Cliff was like, Oh God, here we go. So it was like he was very, very protective of his daughters, you
yeah.
know.
He was. He was. He was very, very nurturing of his daughters too, especially his youngest one.
They
And
we don't see that a lot in television where the father can actually show a soft. So James really didn't show too much softness, except
mhm.
when it came to Thelma. Every now and then,
Well, he was very protective of Thelma because his thing was, she was like, James, Thelma's a good girl. He was like, yeah, and she gonna stay that way.
right? But see,
So
now we beating up on Ti for doing pretty much almost the same thing,
exactly,
right? You see what I'm
exactly,
saying? Yeah,
exactly. That episode with Philip Michael Thomas, sexual behavior in the ghetto.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
They were reading that page. The look he gave that dude as Florida was reading that page. That was classic.
Hmm.
I got my eye on you, nigga. Don't think you gonna out slick me. You know. So
Hmm.
yeah, he was very nurturing, but I have to take that back. There were times when James was very nurturing, but even in his aggressive or masculine state, he was very nurturing. Take, for instance, the episode with JJ and the gang. You know, and he
Mm.
was like, he was very protective, and he was like, "You heard what I said." He was like, "Mad dog, if you don't get your hand out my wife's face, I'm gonna slap a muzzle on you."
Yeah, yeah. When he really wanted to hurt Mad Dog, and
Yeah,
then
he
at
did.
the end he was like, "How can well how am I going soft on the guy that shot my son? Why do I
Yep.
feel sorry for?" That's what he said. Why do I feel
Yeah.
sorry for the guy that shot my son? You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he saw what kind of, that guy. There was no punishment that he could have given Mad Dog that was worse than what he was already going through.
Yeah.
Because
Because
if you
Mad
remember,
Dog didn't have a daddy.
Mad Dog didn't have a daddy, you
Mhm.
know,
Mhm.
and at that point you saw, a situation to where he felt sorry. He felt more sorry for him than for Junior.
There was a
Yeah,
little like the episode where Thelma was dating the older guy, which was played by Louis Gossett Jr. I mean,
yes,
he was real old,
yeah,
and he wanted to marry Thelma, and I mean, he like James was livid, like what my daughter? Yeah, that was
yeah. He was like, said, "You ain't a bad cat for somebody else's daughter."
right, right, right.
And even when she had a man her age, the mechanic, he was like,
Hmm.
"No, my daughter ain't marrying you. My daughter's gonna marry somebody with a future."
Mm.
You know, and he was very protective. And again, they didn't say it, and of course they wasn't going to say it, but I think in some instance that it was James stewardship and his guidance of his family had a direct bearing or effect on how they wound up in the end.
Oh,
uh
absolutely,
he-
absolutely.
Even though he was dead, you can clearly see his influence, because there was one episode on there where Michael was getting ready to join a gang, and then that boy touched that wedding ring that was on his mother's finger, and he snapped.
Hmm.
He gave that boy them hands. He beat that boy's
Beat the
ass.
brakes off of him.
Yeah,
Yep.
he did. He
Yeah.
went to work on that dude.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the issue, as far as TV fathers was concerned, my point was that there's really no difference between James and Cliff.
Now I do want to throw this in though. Now Uncle Phil had his honorable mentions, and the most
Hmm.
memorable episode of all with Fresh
Hmm.
Prince of Bel Air, which puts this scene right here puts Uncle Phil probably in the top 5 best dads of all time. There was
Hmm.
one scene where what's his name? What was his character? Will's character. His father was kind of playing him to the left,
Ben
and
Vereen.
Ben Vereen was playing him
Hmm.
to the left, and he stood him up one time again or whatever.
Hmm.
It was just kind of real nonchalant with him, and it hurt his feelings. And
Hmm.
so there's one scene with him, he's opening up to Uncle Phil and like, I don't need no man, I don't need my dad. I'm gonna be successful. I'm gonna marry me a fly honey, have lots of kids, and I'm gonna be happy. And then he breaks down. He's like, why doesn't my dad love me?
So
And
why you don't want me?
yeah, why doesn't he want me? And Uncle Phil embraced him.
Hmm.
And it was that scene that, of course, is a tearjerker,
Hmm.
but it's so real. Like if a lot of these men, okay, I'm not trying to get soft on y'all, but for real, if a lot of black men had that hug, that resolution right there, will we not be in a better place?
Probably would. Probably would. And when it was all over, you remember the last episode. It was Phil that tells him, he said, "You are my son. You
Hmm.
better have your butt by a phone on Sunday and call me." So yes, I think if a lot of men would have had that resolution, we wouldn't have all these dudes
Pain,
with daddy issues and all this
pain.
pain and all this misunderstanding of
Hmm.
what it was like,
Right.
what it's like to be a father, the responsibilities associated with being a father. I do think that if we had that, we wouldn't have a lot of these situations, because I think a lot of these guys that didn't have their fathers, I think they need closure.
Yeah.
I think a part of them still want to know why. Even on Good Times, going back to Good Times, when James found his father on
Yes.
Good Times,
That was tearjerker as well.
when he found it, he said, He was in there with him. He was like, hey man, where you been? And that was the psychic breaking of the ice between them two. That was cutting through 30 to 40 years of pain. And he was telling his father, he said, I sat on that bench waiting for you to come home,
Mm.
waiting for
Yep.
you to come back.
Sure did.
And he said, I swore that the sun set and rose on you. And he said, well, I got no right to, come in here now. And he tells him, he says, well, his father told him, he said, well, I left because I was trying to find work and it was more, mouths to feed. He said, when I came back, y'all were gone,
Wow.
you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
And, subsequent to this, when they were getting ready, he couldn't just throw his dad out. He was like, well, she made, a cake. Do you want to, you know, have some cake? And then he was like, well, we got company. And they was like, okay, let's do it.
Mhm. Mhm.
And he told him, he said, we missed a lot of good times. That's what he told his dad. We missed a lot of good times. And then when it was all over, she asked him, she said, when he blew out the candles on his birthday cake, she asked him, she said, what did you wish for? He said, I wish for 35 more years so we can make up, so I can make up for what me and dad missed. And he turned around and hugged him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even after all that time,
That
that
resolution.
that resolution was there. That little boy needed to know why, you
And a
know.
lot of our men are walking around with that. It may come from the father, it may come from the mom. Sometimes it comes from both. George Macon wanted to know, he's asking you,
Mhm.
Maceo, what about when Will and Carlton got locked up in the bins and Uncle
Oh
Phil
yeah.
checked the white cops? And I don't remember that
That
episode.
was the episode when him and his law partner went to Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And Will and Carlton drove down, and they were driving in his law partner's vehicle down there to where they were. And the cop pulled them over for driving too slow and put them in jail because he said that they stole the car. And so, they acted like they did steal the car in order to get on TV so that they could send the message out to Phil and Vivian. And when he got there, Phil walked in there and said, well, let those boys out of there. And then, Vivian was talking to him. He told the police officer yelled at his mother, said, sit down and shut up. He said, don't you talk to my wife like that. Don't you talk to my wife like that.
Right,
And then he
right.
asked him, he said, did you, when you got this statement from these boys, did you consult their attorney? He said, no, because we're their attorneys. He said, did you contact their parents? He said, no, we're their parents. He says, so don't tell my wife to sit down and shut up. You get over there and you open up that damn cell and you let those boys out of here, or I'm going to tie this place up in so much litigation. Your grandchildren are going to need lawyers. That mother said, let
Yeah.
them out. Let them out.
Right, right, right,
Let them out. So, again, that's a father standing up.
right,
That's a
right.
father standing up.
Right. I mean,
You know.
even George Jefferson, that's my favorite, y'all. I just love me some George Jefferson. Even in his little own ignorant way, he was doing a father's duty. Like, my son gonna go to the best school, and
Hmm.
my son's gonna do this, and my son's gonna do that. And he just, walked around with his hands on his lapel like a little
Hmm.
chicken. Like, I've done this, and they never gave him his props. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like, so he was
He
very, very proud of Lionel.
he
Very,
prevailed against all odds. He prevailed against
yeah.
all odds.
Hmm.
His son was working for him. He put his son through college. His son became an engineer.
Lionel didn't even want to be in the cleaning
Didn't
business.
even want to be in the cleaning business, but he bought his son in the business. His son could make money working for his father, went through school, had a family, So, George is to be commended because George started from nothing.
Mm-hmm.
You see, this Horatio Alger myth that they like to sell society. If there's anybody that is the embodiment of the Horatio Alger myth, that's the rag to riches myth.
Mm-hmm.
If
Mm-hmm.
there's anybody that embodies that myth, it would be someone like a George Jefferson.
Right. I think we have a lot of George Jefferson's unsung heroes. I mean,
I
the
think we
movie The
do as well.
Banker has been shelved, but that was, something like that. Uh, but we don't. Our black men, they're unsung heroes, and no, we don't have a bunch of skyscrapers run by us, but we have men who are doing the best where they are, and those are the unsung heroes that we need to start paying attention to, because they could be the father of a man who builds a skyscraper. You know what I mean? Like, we just we like I didn't watch Family Matters, y'all, so forgive me if y'all want to talk about Winslow. Y'all welcome to, but I didn't watch Family Matters. I'm sorry.
I
That
didn't
wasn't
like Family
my bag.
Matters because of the stereotypical Urkel image. I didn't like that.
Really?
I didn't care for that. I didn't care. Did I do that? You know, he's sitting around here chasing this woman for 10 years. He done split his damn DNA. He done cloned himself. I mean, he went through every damn thing to be with that girl just to find out she liked him as he was. Now, here he had this old big breasted, big titty,
Oh my
Myra
God, mercy.
Muckhouse Mutros. And
Yeah.
she was there. Yes, Stephen, yes, you're a god. And he running up behind Laura, who's basically dissing it.
Oh,
You know,
like real life? Oh, okay.
yeah, like real
When you diss the one,
life.
when you diss the one that wants
Yeah.
you. But anyway, George Macon
Mhm.
got something for you, Power Strategy.
George Macon said, let's see. George Jefferson was the first to check white people on. Yeah, he got off in Archie Bunker's ass, boy. He got off in Bunker's ass. He checked
Mm-hmm.
Bunker. That was one of the things that I liked. The spinoff was actually, some of George's most raw material. When he
Mm-hmm.
used to get in Archie, he spared Archie no slack,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And they tried to make him the counter of Archie Bunker, which I never really bought,
Yeah, right.
because Archie Bunker's bigotry was discretionary.
Mm-hmm.
George Jefferson's quote unquote bigotry, if you want to call it that, was retaliatory. It was defensive.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of the false equivalency that liberals have and that conservatives have. It's part of this false equivalency that white people in general have. That every time a black man stands up and defends himself or is in any way aggressive to something meant to demean him, now all of a sudden it's reverse racism. And so they saw George as supposedly the counter of Archie Bunker when he really wasn't, you know, just because, his son was married to, or his son was dating Jenny, and
Mm-hmm.
she didn't look like no damn daughter of interracial parents.
Right.
So
That
that was a
oh
stretch. She would have
God.
never been that dark skinned. being,
And I like how they made Lionel very cunning with
hmm
George. And I
hmm
guess that was their play on making him, look even more silly. But
hmm
but yeah, and even Fred Sanford. I mean, he could be real ignorant, but the way him and
Lamont.
Lamont kind
hmm
of played off of each other, even though Lamont could be sassy with his dad or
hmm
smart mouth with his dad, real slick. His Fred was very loving at times. I'll give him that.
I didn't like Lamont was a player hater. Lamont was a player hater. I didn't like Lamont's bitch ass. He was a player hater. Fred had two women rolling at the same time. He does some fuckery and invite them all over. Donna and Carol invited them over, and Fred got caught in. I didn't like that. I didn't like that. He was a
Oh
player
my
hater.
God, Mr.
Lamont was a
Certified,
player
don't
hater.
get you started. Oh
Mine was a
Lord.
player hater. Fred was there getting his thing on. Fred was there. He couldn't just let a player play. That's what I didn't like about him. And that's why I was
Hmm.
glad when Fred cock blocked him. I laughed when Fred cock blocked him. I was glad when Fred cock blocked him because he was always cock blocking his father. But anyway,
Yeah, I'm trying to think of other dads that I liked. That was pretty much.
well, there was another father who, but the show didn't last but for one season, and it was a father in a working class household. There was um, um, Flip Wilson. Flip
I never watched that show. I
Flip
don't even remember
Wilson
that.
and Gladys Knight in Charlie and Company. And he was a city worker. He used to paint, pave, he used to pave the streets of the city. and Gladys Knight was his wife, and a young Jaleel White played his
I
youngest
don't
son.
remember that. I remember all these single mothers
Yeah,
shows.
yeah,
What's happening? You know what I mean? Moesha, wasn't she a single mom?
no, no.
Okay, what was the
It was
other
her
show?
stepmother. She was married to Moesha's
Okay.
father.
Okay, it was another show. The Parkers.
Oh, the Parkers. Yeah.
So it was just like this influx of give me a break.
Hmm.
It was like that image was really pushed hard in the 80s, and then we had Oprah. I
Yeah.
mean,
Well,
you know.
I didn't care. I didn't care too much for the modern shit. I didn't. For me, and I still watch him to this day. I still watch. I got a Sanford and Son ringtone on my phone.
Uh 227 was good.
Yeah, it was.
The father though, I felt like Mary was very domineering. What do you think?
Yeah, she was. She was. It was basically Florence with a husband. That's all.
Right,
It was
right,
Florence with a husband because
right.
the one that was feminine was Sonia.
Sandra.
Sandra, yeah,
Sandra.
Sandra was the one that was feminine there.
She
Uh,
was the original secure the bag, y'all. I just want y'all to know. Sandra was the original secure the
Now
bag.
you might not want to say that because Sandra was a player.
Well.
Sandra was a player. Sandra was a player.
But that whole she was kind of softer than Mary.
Hmm.
Mary, she was a lot softer than Mary. Mary was kind of harsh to her husband. And I'm like, do they ever have sex? Like in my mind, I'm like, is she ever
Because
saw,
she
like
was
when I
not
watch
very
those old
feminine.
episodes?
She
um,
was not very feminine at all.
no, not at all. She always had her hand on her hip and looking
Yeah.
up at her husband, just
I
kind
mean, Pearl was softer than her.
of right, right,
You
right,
know,
right.
Pearl was softer than she was.
What about Amen? What about not even what's the dad's name in Amen? Um
Fry, Deacon
Fry,
Fry.
Deacon Fry.
Mhm.
Daddy. He was very, very tender with Thelma because she was a whole mess. But he was another good dad.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah.
Deacon Ernest Fry. He was shady though. He was a shady lawyer. They had to make him a little shady.
Hmm.
George Maker says Sanford and Son is my ringtone. Uh, he said, "What about Tom and Helen Will the zebra man?" Yeah, George used to always call them zebras. Used to always call them zebra. I wrote an article on the Negro Manosphere. See how I keep coming back to the Negro Manosphere? See how I keep coming back? I wrote an article on swirling, on interracial relationships, the Willises, in retrospect, on the Negro Manosphere. You might want to go over there and check it out. Well, I kind of talk about that. What about what's happening? We discussed that. 227, we discussed that. Sherman Hemsley, we discussed that. But yeah, yeah, Charlie and Company with Gladys Knight, Flip Wilson, Christophe St. John. I don't remember the girl actor. I don't remember her, but I do remember Jaleel White, who went on to play Stephen Urkel, was on that show. I do remember that.
Even on Different Strokes, what was the friend's name? Dudley.
Hmm.
Dudley's father was very tender with Dudley.
Hmm. He was.
He was a good father. Yeah.
He was. Hell, for that matter, Mr. Drummond was a good father. Well, he was white.
Right, right.
A lot of people didn't like the message that sent either.
Right, right. They was
You
really
know,
pushing that in the 80s.
yeah, because the late Robin Harris was like, some nigga could have took these kids. You know.
Webster, remember the storyline
Yep.
Webster
Hmm.
that was going on at the same time. Yeah,
Yeah,
so
his father, his Webster's mother and father died in a car accident. You
mhm,
know,
mhm, mhm.
and those people were the people that he was staying with. Those were his father's teammates.
Rock was not a father, y'all. We keep telling y'all. Everybody keeps bringing up Rock. Rock was not a father.
Mm-mm. Rock's father lived in the house with him, but no, he was not a father.
Okay. Rock's father was, if I can remember correctly, he was like real slick at the mouth.
Hmm.
He was just kind of slickster, just kind of like, I'm old, I don't want to do
Hmm.
nothing.
Hmm.
I just want to lay around the house and be taken care of. That's what I remember of his father. I don't know what you think.
His father was like, look, his father lived through a lot of hard times. and he just wanted to die gracefully. His father, what his attitude, his father's attitude was that he was just happy having survived it. That was his father's disposition. I'm just happy to still be here after all the shit I've been through. So his father was real old school. His father lived through the 40s and 50s, you know, and rock came along, of course, in the 60s. But his father had been through, the Great Depression, the Jazz Age in the 50s. So his father was like, "Look, I'm happy to just having survived it all. So I have a right to be a smart ass because I made it through. So he was cool. I
We
liked his
should
father.
do a show on black couples in TV and break down which couples had the best dynamic.
Mm,
Not today, but
yeah, that's interesting. I
yeah.
would have to think about that because I'm trying to remember all the black couples that were in TV.
Because these kids don't even have a reference except for Martin and Gina. They're watching syndication. But we
Hmm.
had, George and Wheezy. We had,
Hmm.
you know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
James in Florida. So these kids are growing up on Martin and Gina.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, yeah. That's
yeah.
well. That's they would be what would that be? I think they that would cover Generation X.
But
Generation X.
these kids are
The
watching.
millennials are watching Martin. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I
Because
don't even
how
I
many
don't even see couples on TV
That's what
anymore.
I'm saying. We saying the same thing. We don't
The
really see.
couples that I see on TV is Tasha and Ghost, and I'm not sure that's anything you want to
But that's my
replicate.
point. That's my point.
You
That's
know,
why we need to really break down these dynamics because the whole triangle between Ghost and Angela and I need to watch this season by the way.
or
Uh
Cookie and Lucius.
Cookie, we need to break them all down because that's what
Yeah.
these kids are ingesting and that's what they're translating into relationships. I
Right,
always got to bring around Robin relationships. I know you hate
right,
that, but
right. Jim Jim Faison says, "What do you think? What do all you think about from the '90s show, My Wife and Kids?" With that, we've already discussed that, dog. We're good with that. We don't have an issue with that. I like Damon Wayans. I like his character because he was mature. He was a father. It was pretty much an updated version of. If I had to pick one, I would say it's the updated version of the Jeffersons. My
Flex
Wife and
had a
Kids was
show
like
too.
updated,
Flex
huh?
had a show too.
Oh, One on One. So he
Yes,
was a
yes, yes.
single father
Yeah,
with
yeah,
what was her name? Kyla Pratt. I used to love
yeah,
Kyla Pratt because she had the biggest lips. I was like, oh yeah, oh
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I like to see what that mouth do, baby.
Oh
But
my
yeah,
God, Mason.
yeah, yeah. I got 75. But anyway, I did I did like One on One, and Pam was on that show because she was actually her mother. She was actually that was actually her mother. She played her mother. And let's see who else. The another comedian. I think his name was Kelly. Kelly. I forget his name. The little short comedian. He was funny, and he faded off into obscurity. You
Hmm.
know, him and Flex and some other people. That were on there. They somebody saying the Proud Family. Okay, baby, we ain't talking about cartoons, Nick. We're not talking about
Girl.
cartoons. We're not talking about
But
cartoons.
see, that's what she grew up on. See what I'm saying? That's what she
Yeah,
grew up on. We talking about Neek.
yeah,
Neek is
yeah,
young.
yeah,
She
yeah.
grew
Nick,
up on
Nick
that.
is young. Nick is young.
We old heads.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
So, yeah, love and hip hop. That's a bad word in here today. Love and hip hop is a bad word in here today. And the hip generation hip hop or growing up hip hop. Yeah, that's a bad word in here today too. The Bernie Mac show. Okay, I give you that. The Bernie Mac show.
What
He
about
couldn't.
Everybody Loves Chris?
Yes. Oh yes. Everybody
I
loves
didn't
Chris.
watch that one. I didn't watch
Julius
that
was
one.
a throwback to James Evans. Julius. Chris, his father was a throwback to James Evans. I mean, he kept a job, but they had a house though in the hood in Bedford Stuyvesant in Brooklyn. And his mother was kind of sassy. She was another one, kind of sassy, popped off at the mouth.
Mm.
I don't need a job. Now she would stay at home, but she wasn't a stay at home mother because she liked being a homemaker. She was a stay at home mother because she was lazy. because
Mm.
she couldn't get along with nobody in the workforce.
See
You
what
know,
that
and it,
stereotype.
it was like, well, I don't need this. My man has two jobs, and she would give him the finger and go out the door and all of that shit. And
Mm.
I didn't like her character.
Didn't
I didn't
D.L.
like her character.
Hughley have a family
The
show?
Hugleys, yep, the Hugleys with
Okay.
Elise Neal. Elise Neal, my baby, Elise Neal, absolutely. He had a daughter and a son on that show, and that was pretty much an uptake of the Jeffersons too. That was more in the mold of the because for a minute he had a smart ass maid, but his
Mm.
wife wasn't as
Cause he was
emasculating
the
as
vending
we.
machine guy, right?
Yeah, he
Okay.
was.
I did
Yeah, he
watch
was.
a little bit of that. I did watch.
Yeah, he was. You know, I didn't like. They started with the Florence dynamic, and they had to get rid of her after a while. And then, of course, his mother and father, Florence, Marla Gibbs, who played Florence in the Jeffersons,
Was the
also played
mama.
his mother.
Mm-hmm.
And they were married, but then they wound up getting a divorce. And I didn't care for that. I didn't. I liked the Hugleys because it showed, he was affluent, he made it out the hood, and it was the same old formula. Okay, he was, among a bunch of white folks in the suburbs, and he was trying to keep his blackness and all of that shit.
But
So
now, in contrast, though, we had Roseanne, who was working class white folks,
hmm
and they could be working class and still, be on that white trash or whatever. They could still
hmm
be on that. But
hmm
if we had a problem with Good Times, you know what I'm saying? Like, and then there was Family Ties, where the father, they were what you call hippies.
hippies, yeah,
So you had this tender father, and then we really didn't have many answers to what we were seeing in the white sectors as far as families and stuff. We've always had to work hard to present black fathers. That's crazy.
yeah. The thing was that with Roseanne, and they got away with because Roseanne was a bit, her character was sour. But I noticed that even though she wasn't the most feminine, there was no stereotype or ill intent or ill motivation prescribed to that character. She still kept her femininity, even though she was really a bitch. She was really a bitch, but that no one looked at her as being emasculated.
No, Roseanne was no parts of feminine. She,
Yeah.
but they were going head to head. Now this is old school, so y'all probably don't know, but they were going head to head with Cosby Show. So you had
Yeah.
the affluent or upper middle class black family competing with white trash on TV,
hmm
and that kind of pushed her. It didn't give her the edge. Cosby Show still, if y'all read up on that competition, Cosby Show still beat Roseanne, but it spoke to that no matter, they gonna push their people.
hmm
They gonna push their people, right or
Yeah.
wrong or indifferent. It came head to head with Cosby. Nah, they was gonna push that, but she still came up second to beat.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That was a pretty. It was I couldn't really get into Roseanne like that. I couldn't get into it. I couldn't get into it at all. So I couldn't.
Now, the funny thing about family, Married with Children, this is why I do talk about Married with Children, because it actually was intended to be, it was based on a black family.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I know it had a black writer, but I didn't know it was based on
It
a
was
black
it was
family.
based on a black family. The
Mm.
characters were intended to be black.
I didn't know that.
And
I
they
know that Al Bundy was nice with them
he
insults,
was the
boy.
original red pill, I guess. No
He
ma'am.
cracked. Yeah, he was. Yeah, he was.
No ma'am.
What was it? National Organization of Men Against Amazonian Masterhood. Yeah, yeah,
And we laughed then, but
yeah,
now it's real, y'all.
yeah.
So,
And then
yeah.
Jefferson had that. Oh my God! She was actually a lesbian in real life.
Who?
And Jefferson, what's her name?
Marcy? Oh yeah,
Yeah, she was
yeah.
Marcy. I was
Mhm.
trying to remember Amanda Burse. I think that's her name. She was a real life lesbian, and she there was nothing about her that screamed, "Okay, why would you be married?" Because I'm like, dear God, I mean, ugh.
Well, toward the end, Jefferson ended up being beta male, and he cheated
Hmm.
on her because see, Marcy was very in her masculine energy.
Yeah.
So what they were doing, they was pushing a very feminist undertone. That's why I like that show because it was really pushing red pill and the
Hmm.
answer to red pill. Well, it was really pushing the feminist ideology, and Al
Hmm.
Bundy had no ma'am, which was the response to Marcy in the feminist undertone. That was why he started no ma'am. So
Yeah.
really, if you watch Marcy's character, Jefferson ended up being a beta male. They ended up getting divorced, and Marcy ended up being more boyish toward the end. She started actually dressing like a dude, and they played. They had Peg acting like a lazy housewife. That was a feminist undertone. That
I,
you
I, I
had
don't.
this
I
sexy
don't think that
lazy
peg helps
woman.
your movement.
Yeah, right. Because that was the narrative they were pushing. That these housewives, they need to go to work because all they doing is sitting at home and they ain't doing nothing. They walking around sashaying and they not doing nothing. See, that was the narrative they were pushing.
You know.
If you look at Peg, what did she do? Nothing.
Yeah.
So, but she was a housewife.
She was a house.
So, you know,
She was a horny housewife that sat around spending her man's money eating bonbons.
yes, Jefferson was a Lester Diamond. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, he was.
Marcy paid the bills.
Yep. 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 Okay. Yeah. Uh, that those were very interesting shows. But again, my classics. I still go back to my classics. Let's see. Eight is enough. I remember that. I really didn't get into eight
I
is
like it
enough.
enough.
I didn't get into it.
Mhm.
Um, truth be told, I like the Waltons better than Eight is enough because at least
Oh,
that was
don't get me
about a
started on the
country family.
Waltons. That was a true story, actually. That was based on true events, and so was Little House on the Prairie,
Oh yeah, I
based on
remember that one
good.
too. I remember that one
I
too.
now my favorite was not my favorite. He was one of my favorites. Was Andy Griffith. Uh,
Oh yeah,
now
Andy
that's
Griffith.
the kids in the chat are going like, "What, Nicole? Like you're 100 years old." But Andy
Mhm.
Griffith, we grew up on Andy Griffith. We grew up on Dick Van Dyke.
I told you guys today that this was going to be a chat for Generation Xers. I told you you might not be able to relate, but that's what it is. George Macon says Silver Spoons, yeah, single white father. Alfonso Ribeiro was in that show, by the
Sure
way.
was. Yep,
Actor
sure
that would
was.
go on to play Carlton. That's actually when he was close to 16 or 17. He was a Michael Jackson stand-in, a wannabe, because he was in that Pepsi commercial with Michael. Yep. Silver Spoons was good. Uh,
Oh, when Al went off. I'm telling you, Al was red pill. He went off on that woman at the shoe store when she was putting them shoes on. I see. Did you remember that episode?
yeah, yeah, he did. Yeah, he did. He did.
Yeah, yeah, that
He
was
said,
really good.
"I'm telling you, I wear a size 8." He said, "When was that? When you hit puberty?" Boy, he had some jokes for your
He had
ass,
some
boy.
one-liners,
Yeah, he
boy.
did.
Oh
Yeah,
my
he did.
god. Yeah,
Yeah, he
yeah.
did. You know. Um, but yeah, there was also, Andy Griffin was one thing. It was just a place where everything was simple. Things were simple.
I find myself watching some of these old shows because I miss I'm just in a nostalgic mood and I just miss TV. It wasn't an innocent time, but it was a time where just it's better than now. Sorry, it was just better than now. Where we had Dallas and we had what's the other show? Dallas and we
That
had
Dallas Falcon Crest Dynasty.
oh yeah, Dynasty.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was
yeah,
just Dominique Devereaux, the original Black Bee on TV. You know what I'm
yep.
saying? Like, where is that at? Now we
Hmm.
turn on, we see Beyond the Pole. We see Love and Hip Hop Atlanta. We see, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
That's what we see.
yeah. Well, again, it's almost as if because back during that period we were trying to get black folks on TV, but now it seems like in a sad way, it's sort of like the way it was back then when we were trying to get
Lord,
black folks on.
somebody said Benny Hill. Lord have mercy. You owe with us. Remember I Dream of Jeannie now All
Benny
American
Hill wasn't no father. Now, come on now, get out of here with that. Benny
Dream of
Hill
Jeannie.
wasn't no father. Get out of here. I remember Benny Hill. Don't do that. Benny Hill wasn't no father. Benny Hill got me through puberty. I'm sure he did. Benny Hill got a lot of people through. Man, oh man.
Oh my
They in here
goodness.
talking about, they in here talking about Benny Hill.
Ladies, if you're married, get you a I Dream a Genie outfit. Girl, name your daughter after me. There you go. The I Dream a Genie outfit. Yeah. But yeah, that was good TV. And I just missed the innocence that
Well,
it
the
represents.
thing was is that even during that period, even in all those shows, even Good Times, there was always the one thing I loved about it. There was always a message of hope. And then the characters that were in Good Times, you had Sweet Lenny. I got picked up in front of Dennis. You can't charge me with no crime.
He had that
'Cause
brush.
yeah, he would always have that thing, brush that little fur coat off and shit that he had, his little chinchilla or whatever. Brush
Sweet
that shit
daddy.
off, get into the elevator, and then open his coat and shit, all that stuff.
But
He boosted.
Sweet Daddy was a simp now. Sweet
Sweet
Daddy was a
no,
simp.
no, no. Sweet Daddy was a player though.
No,
Sweet
no,
Daddy,
no.
sweet, Sweet
Savannah
Daddy,
Morgan she ran Sweet Daddy.
Sweet Daddy was a Sweet Daddy was a trick. Sweet Daddy was a trick.
Oh, that's
He
what
was
it
playing.
was.
Yeah, it was a trick. Sweet Daddy used to buy his women Cadillacs. You know, Sweet
Savannah.
Daddy would do anything for his women.
Yeah, she ran Sweet Daddy.
So I remember when she had JJ paint that photograph, and she was like, you gonna have to get me a few more of them Cadillacs so you make up for this here one. I mean, he was you talking about somebody tricking. Sweet Daddy was tricking his ass off.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He bought her that Cadillac. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. That was his soft spot was Savannah Morgan.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
that's
was.
why I said he's a simp because every time she said something, he was like, "Okay, honey, like, come on, baby, come on." I mean, he take his hat off, he get all soft when it came to Savannah Morgan. So that's why I said Sweet Daddy was a gangster, but he was a simp when it came to his girl.
Sweet Daddy. Of course, but then you also had, and I gotta call his name, Nathan Bookman. Nathan
Okay, yeah, he
Booker.
was a simp.
Booker. He was a
He
simp.
he was a
Yes,
simp.
Violet. Yes, Violet. Nathan. Yes, Violet. Nathan.
He was a
Yes,
simp.
Violet. Yeah, he was a simp.
Yeah.
No question, he was a simp. He even tried to step out on her a couple of times. You know,
Oh yeah, he did try.
he
They got
did try.
caught at the club. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So Sweet Daddy was I could appreciate because he would come in there and snap his fingers and he had his goons and they would ease to the side and take off his coat. That shit was cool as hell. That shit,
Oh,
Sweet Daddy
Green
was cool.
Acres. Yes, I love Green Acres.
Yeah.
But yeah, Sweet Daddy was yeah, and I don't think Sweet Daddy had kids. Like he didn't have
He
kids all
didn't.
over.
He didn't have kids. He was
Yeah.
just a numbers runner
Mhm.
and he was a loan shark and a numbers runner was what he
Mhm.
was. And he was the king of the ghetto. He ran the ghetto, you know.
Mhm.
And my favorite was JJ boy, you in trouble. That was
Yeah.
my favorite,
I didn't
you
really
know.
like Keith like that because he was an alcoholic. He hit Thelma. When he hit Thelma, I was done. I was like, okay, I checked out.
I think at that point they were just looking for anything.
Mhm.
I think
Mhm.
they were just grasping at straws and they were trying to push the show as
Mhm.
far as they could push it. And they needed a male figure. They needed a serious male figure
Mhm. Mhm.
because Jimmy Walker couldn't carry that male figure. He couldn't carry that off very well. And I
Mhm.
think they needed one that was more centered and he couldn't really carry it off
They
too.
made him an athlete because that would be appealing, but it's still,
Yeah, that
yeah.
that wasn't very good. And then when they came back with they had to bring Florida back because she was like the serious stabilizer. She balanced the show,
Mhm.
and they had to bring her back so that
They
they
just
would be
didn't
able to
have
show
any
some kind
male
of
eye
direction.
candy. It's sorry, they just didn't have any male eye candy.
Well, it was not about having male eye candy though. This is
It kind of is though because y'all had Thelma and y'all had Walona. We had what?
Walona wasn't eye candy. Thelma was, but not Walona. Okay.
But my point is, you had somebody. JJ was not eye candy. Michael is not eye candy. Bookman, come on.
What about Sweet Lynette?
Okay, like I said, there was no eye candy.
What about Sweet Daddy?
Even Sweet Daddy was not eye candy. He was old. Like even Keith was not cute.
But Sweet Daddy had the bag.
Okay, like I said, there was no eye candy.
Wait a minute,
Good
though.
times.
Wait a minute.
No.
Sweet
I
Daddy.
tell you, the one time there was eye candy, one time, and that was um the cousin Pookie Poo. That was her name, but
Oh, okay.
cousin
Florida's
Ray,
cousin, Pookie Poo.
cousin Ray was played by Calvin Lockhart. Man,
Yeah, the late great Calvin Lockhart.
ooh, he was ooh, yes. Okay, when he came on, that was it. After that, that's the only time that there was a fine, good-looking man on that show. Even James wasn't even. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
anyway, I know that's off the point, but yeah.
Well, hey, it, we didn't look at them. Well, I take that back because she was
Yes,
also in
y'all
Jet.
did. Y'all had Thelma. We had
She
nobody.
was in Jet magazine. Okay, so she was in. She was. I think she was in a centerfold in Jet magazine, if I remember correctly. So, yeah,
She's
yeah.
really sweet in person, and she's that pretty in person as
You
well.
met her before.
I did meet her a couple of times. Um, she's very personable. Her daughter went to school down here. She's very personable, and how she looks on TV is how she looks now, 30, 40 years later. She actually looks that pretty in person, and she's really, really sweet. So
Jim Faison said, "What about eBay?"
that's what I'm saying. Like, really?
He
Like,
said,
come
"What about
on.
eBay?"
They didn't even give them
eBay was eye candy, wasn't he?
boyfriends. I mean, JJ had pretty girlfriends. They didn't even
What
film
about
boyfriends.
all the Nixonite? Alderman Davis. I am not a crook. He wasn't. That didn't get it for you.
No.
He didn't get Alderman Davis. Didn't do it.
Maceo, stop.
Fred C. Davis. Fred C. Davis didn't do it for you.
Bye.
No, no, no. Okay. Not
They
Fred
said,
C.
why are you
Davis.
talking bad about Walona?
I didn't. I didn't. I'm sorry. Walona didn't do anything for me. She didn't. She didn't. I liked. Actually, I like Savannah Morgan better than I like Walona.
Because you like hood chicks, so don't get us
Ratchets.
started.
She was a ratchet.
She was ratchet, and you
She
like
was a
ratchet.
ratchet.
But like I said,
Uh,
eBay the African Prince was not attractive. Okay,
what?
stop.
eBay wasn't attractive.
He was not attractive. They didn't even get Walona. Now Walona has some cuties. Frank Mason. Frank Mason was fine.
Okay.
She was smoking crack. She should have got Frank Mason. I'm sorry.
Somebody said, "What about Ned the Wino?"
Okay. Bye. Bye. Anyway.
Oh God. Oh, and
Fishbone was no, none of
Fishbone.
them.
Neek says, Mad Dog from Satan Knights.
Okay, he was kind of cute though. I ain't gonna lie. Mad Dog was kind of cute. I know
Mad
it's not gonna
Dog
be
from
like y'all
Satan
like
Knights.
thugs. Nicole like thugs. She like Mad Dog from Good Time.
Mm-hmm.
Mad Dog from Good Time
Mm-hmm.
was
I
cute.
knew it. Get it?
Y'all,
You
he
heard
was
it here today at
cute.
4:48.
I'm
Nicole
sorry.
like that thug love.
Mad
Nicole like that thug love.
I'm sorry. Mad Dog was cute. I'm sorry.
Thug love. Thug love. Thug love. Thug love.
Yep.
All
Oh,
right.
Thelma's boyfriend had been in jail for bigamy. He was cute.
Oh.
That was one boyfriend that was cute. But Frank Mason was fine. Mad Dog was fine. Um,
Mm-hmm.
mhm.
Now Nikki into my hood dude was fine.
He
Thug
was
love.
neat.
Thug love.
He was cute. I'm sorry, Mad Dog was fine. I'm
He
sorry.
like that thug love.
Well, you like ratchets?
Thug love. Hey, I never heard that fact.
Savannah cussed out everybody.
Yes, she did.
Everybody. She came
She
in the
did.
room slamming doors, and
Hmm.
Meg Dog came in there. Why they name you
With a
Thelma?
pistol.
Yes, yes.
So, why they name you Thelma?
What kind of name is that?
Said the same way your mama looked at you and called you Mad Dog.
Yes. But he was cute. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. But
Y'all hear this confession? Y'all
well,
hear this
right.
confession? Thug love.
Mm-mm.
Thug love.
Thug love. I'm just saying, I was just pointing out an observation. He was attractive. Frank Mason was attractive, and well, the cousin Ray was attractive. That out of all the men that came through that show, That was the only, and I think the uncle, the cousin that would lend money to them.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
He was attractive. He was an
yeah,
attractive older man. But
yeah.
other than that, the rest of them were.
He played Fred's love and Fred's rival in Sanford and Son. Big Lou Turner. He played Big Lou Turner, who Fred was competing against in the Senior Olympics over Donna. I
Yes.
never did like that. She never gave Fred any ass. I never liked her. She never
Hey,
gave Fred any ass. I never liked her. I never did like her. I never did like her.
she
She
was
never
a
gave
good
Fred any
woman,
booty.
ACO. You talking about the
No,
nurse? You talking about the nurse that
yeah,
Fred
Donna,
wanted to
Donna,
marry?
Donna. I didn't like her. She never did give Fred any
That's
ass.
who he needed. He didn't need
No, no. She never did give Fred any ass. Fred
he
was
didn't
better
need
off with
none.
Carol.
He didn't need none.
Fred, yeah. No, no. Fred needed to bust a good one. She wouldn't help Fred
Oh
out.
my God, Maceo.
I never did like her ass.
Really?
I never did like her ass. Yeah. I didn't like Donna. I didn't like Donna. Uh, let's see. Nick said
Frank
Frank
Mason.
Mason is
Yes.
the ideal man. He was fine. He had money. Walona was tripping for fumbling that bag.
She right though. We talked about that before you got here, Neek. But yeah, absolutely. Frank was all that in a bag of chips. She's stupid.
Doug says Tony because Lamont was sabotaged. Yeah, I said that, Doug. He was a hater. Lamont was a hater. He was a hater. I didn't like him. He was a hater and a cock blocker. Even when Fred had some ratchets coming over for him, Bubba, Leroy, and Skillet, and Grady, he blocked. He got in the way.
And
Fred couldn't even get it on with Fast Fanny. He,
speaking of
he was
booty,
a hater.
most of the fathers were faithful. James
Yeah, they
didn't
were.
cheat on Florida. George
Yeah.
didn't cheat on Wheezy.
Mhm.
Uncle Phil was faithful. So I
Yeah.
did like that part of it.
Well, I mean, this was family. This was family. So it was
Hmm.
about family. And for George, for all intents and purposes, her masculine demeanor aside, Wheezy was who he was supposed to be with.
Hmm. Yeah.
Wheezy was who he
Masculine
was supposed to
energies.
be with.
Mm-hmm.
So but that being said, um, I think that those shows, represented a very um, prosperous. I don't want to say prosperous, but a very, very hopeful period in our history. And it was during a time where our culture, where we were trying to figure out who we were as a people, and we were trying to figure out uh, we were which way we were trying to go. It was a very,
Mm-hmm.
very rich time. I want to use that. A very, very rich time because at that time, being black was cool. In the 70s, being black was cool. I mean, there was a surgence of pride that we hadn't
I'm
had
black and
since
I'm
the
proud.
era.
Yeah.
Yes, that was an era that we hadn't had since the period of Garveyism, you know. So yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, Lloyd said Lamont was a cock blocker. Fred was a G from Watch.
Oh
You
Lord.
goddamn right. You
Oh.
damn right. I didn't like his ass. I wanted Fred to beat the hell out of him, Fred. Beat the hell out of him.
Oh my goodness.
So
He needed Donna because she balanced him.
he didn't need no damn Donna.
Oh my God.
He didn't need no damn Donna. She never gave Fred any ass. I never liked her for that.
Oh
I
Maceo.
never liked her for that.
Uh,
All right. So, but again, to, bring this back to where we came in at is that all of these guys, there were very little difference. And to appreciate them is to appreciate a very, very, again, rich time in our history and understanding who we were. See, in this period, nobody gives a shit about history because we think history is just the chronology of dates and times. We don't see how it's useful. We don't understand how it works. We don't understand how it functions. And because we don't understand how it functions, we get confused about it. Again, I look at how, take for instance how white society treats their pioneers. I mean, they revere those guys. Over here, you know, we don't even respect Grandmaster Flash. We don't respect Melly Mel. We don't respect Big Daddy Kane. We don't respect Rakim. It's because we don't have any respect for history. We don't value history, and because we don't value history, we don't respect our accomplishments, and we don't respect our achievements, and we really don't respect when we have black people doing some fly shit. So those shows remind me. Those shows are reminiscent of some very, very pivotal points in our history as a people, and we should never forget who we were. We should never forget where we came from, because it tells. John Henry Clark said that history is a clock. It's a clock that people use to tell their political time of day. He says that history tells a people where they have been and where they still must go and where they still must be. So these are the things, or these are the images that we love, because it tells us what we were. There was a time when we did like having a two-parent household. There was a period in time when black men and women did want to have families, did want to get married, and did want to have children. There was a time when we did want to have traditional values. And
Yes.
so there was a time when we championed those things. There were times when those things were what we aspired to. But now we're in another culture, and now we're in another time, and the culture that we're in is actually killing us. The culture that we are in is actually killing us. But I won't get into that at this time either. So, Miss Nicole, do you have anybody else that you wanted to bring up or introduce, or you know any other thing we missed?
No, I know you hate panels, so but I do hope that you do a show on the evolution of black men in sports and how sports is, how it started out to where it is now. And but this was a fun discussion as always. Me and you always have a blast. Um and I think that television isn't all bad. We just need to critically think when we're watching TV, because the word programming is called television programming, but it really is programming. A lot of shows that we see that are endearing to us, we're really planting seeds in our brains about how we perceive our family, how we look at each other. A lot of times we are digesting some of the rhetoric that we see on television. And the more reality television we see, we're digesting some of what they're going through. We take that into our own lives. We see that with Jeff Bezos. How many men use that as a talking point? Because they are digesting what that man is going through into their own personal life. They don't even have a wife. They don't even have a girlfriend, but they upset about Jeff Bezos. You know what I'm saying? So,
Mhm.
so just imagine just what we see and ingesting on television and what we read. I'm gonna be dealing with women, and what we're reading is keeping us from what we want. So I'm glad we had this discussion. And hopefully, when we go back and watch these television shows, we critically think. We don't just take it at face value, but we actually think about what's being said, what they're trying to tell us through this programming. The history of channels, the history of television shows tells us a lot. And just kind of critically think about what we want. And then sometimes, y'all, we just need to really turn the television off and pick up a good book. And I ain't talking about some Zane or some, porn. I'm talking about a really good book, 48 Laws of Power type reading, the 4-hour work week type reading, that type of stuff. Sometimes we just need to turn the TV off and really start reading. So thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure. You're the only person that could get me to do a panel on a holiday weekend. So
Well, thank you for coming on, because I know generally do most of your stuff during the
Monday through Wednesday.
Monday through Wednesday. So
Yeah.
it was a real cool
And you're our
to get you
favorite
on here.
troll at Integrity TV.
Yeah, I'll be over there trolling shit. Yeah, I'll be over there cheerleading for my ratchets. Uh, all of you in bonnets, Tweety Bird slippers, dingy pajama bottoms, and
Listen
halter
to him.
tops.
Like, do not listen to Maceo.
Uh, I love
Don't
you all.
don't listen to him.
Only God can judge you. God loves you. To steal a closing line, God loves you, and I love you too.
you
And you know,
you know what? I'm not
you
even gonna
know,
start up with you.
you know. All right. In any event, we getting ready to close up and get out of here. I would like to thank my guest, Miss Nicole Michelle, for coming over here and kicking it with us. I had sent the link to Big Mike, but I think he's doing another clap back at Dick Johnson. So
Oh
uh,
my! Wait a minute. Is it? See if he's going live tonight, because that'll be fun.
I don't think he's going live. It's a
Oh, okay.
recorded show. It's a
Oh,
recorded show.
okay.
So um,
He is the goat of thumbnails for
yeah,
sure.
he is. And I think he's doing another show at Officer Dick Johnson.
Okay.
So, in any event, I would like to thank everybody for joining me here. I would like to thank my guest again. Everyone, please go over there to Miss Nicole's channel, which is Inner Beauty TV, Monday through Wednesday. Go over there, subscribe, and support Miss Nicole Michelle. I wish I had your link. I'll think of it next
That's
time. I
okay.
don't
They
have
need to be donating to
your link.
Tony, because if y'all haven't voted on his next show, y'all need to. He has some really good content. He has a legal background. He's giving y'all free game. Like, I don't even understand why it's not like your chat room is not full of black men listening to you. Like, seriously, because they are so afraid of the courts and they think black women just have this inherent power, and you're sitting up here trying to arm them with information and they don't even show up. Like, that is like really dumb. But anyway, y'all need to go to his community tab, check out his polls so he can give the people what they want, because he's giving you information. I know for a fact is not offered anywhere, definitely not in Black YouTube, and it's not offered specifically tailored to Black men anywhere else. So he's trying to give y'all good content. Y'all gotta feed them, help push them, hit the like button,
At
and
least
throw them a little something, throw, put a little, give them a little, you ain't got to give them 75, but hey, if you want to give them 75, I ain't hating. So go
I'll
ahead
take
and
75.
tip your brother.
Yeah.
Come on. This was a fun show, but a lot of stuff but didn't you do a show on legalization of weed, how to sell
Yep.
weed
I,
legally?
I
Like, who
got to
does
show up. I got to show up there how to make money. The 7 ways to make money legally selling
that?
weed.
Selling weed,
The
really?
7 different ways to make money selling weed. I also have in my Patreon section, I have how men can protect themselves from messy divorces, how they can protect their money. That was a podcast I think you and I did, or you and I did on trusts,
Mm-hmm.
settlement agreements,
Mm-hmm.
and prenuptial agreements.
Prenups and
So I have information on how you guys, because see, you guys in Red Pill talking about, oh, marriage is horrible and she took all my money, but I gave
he's
you a
giving
way
y'all information to win.
to protect your wealth.
You talked about
When
child support the other
I,
night.
I
They wouldn't
talked
even.
about child support. Yeah, exactly. I talked about ways to defend yourself in the child support system. I spoke about that. The poll that I have up on my community tab is, what do you want? What do you guys want to talk about next?
We're gonna
Felony
be talking about
expungement?
felony expunges. Y'all know y'all
Yeah.
got cousin Bobo
Oh, I
that
know I got
you.
some niggas in here with felonies.
That's what I'm trying to say. So y'all need to support, because this kind of content, y'all always talking about the niggatry and whatnot. But you have a brother that's coming on here giving y'all free. Y'all need to stop being cheap. Y'all need to promote people that's giving you good content. And my audience is very, very supportive. And a lot of them ain't super chatting me because they're students. So, and I appreciate each and every one of you all. Come support Mr. Maceo and what he's trying to do. And Genosha TV is going to be a real good thing. He shared with me some of the things he's trying to do over there. Content, he's letting y'all know he's trying to put out some fire content. So if y'all don't want niggatry or y'all want a balance, then support the other half. Okay, like
Well,
y'all support the niggatry,
yeah, the thing is over here, I try not to do too many shows.
And
Uh,
he doesn't let people beat up on women over here.
yeah, I don't do that over here. I don't do that over here.
Fellas,
Uh,
y'all can mix and mingle with pretty chicks, and it ain't all, they not disrespectful to you. It's a nice, comfortable space. Cause over there I have snipers. So over here, Maceo is nice to y'all, but over there I have snipers. So I mean, y'all support your boy.
Holla at me. Well, in any event, like I said, my channel is dedicated towards arming men and teaching them how to defend themselves. My philosophy is Panther philosophy from the perspective that I teach people how to survive. I'm all about giving you survival programs to help you to prosper until we can turn this situation around and become permanently successful. So that's what my content is geared towards. From time to time, I let you guys know I may be doing some relationship stuff, sex and dating stuff, but
Wait, wait,
I'm
wait,
getting
wait.
kind of
What?
tired of that.
What? I'm sorry. What did you say? You were gonna be talking about relationships? You talking
From
about
time to
trick?
time,
You
from
talking about
time
trick?
to time. Yeah, yeah, yeah. From
You
time
talking
to
about
time.
tricking or like
Yeah, the
bonfire?
tricking thing, the tricking thing, the tricking thing, the
Oh,
tricking.
oh, oh,
Because relationships,
I thought you meant
I'm
wrong.
not a game, I'm not a game advisor. I'm not a game
Oh,
advisor. I'm not a dating
okay.
coach.
You
I'm
know
not
I'm
any of
messing
that.
with you.
I don't do any of that shit. I get down to the bare essentials. I get down to the bare essentials. I don't do, I'm not a dating coach. I'm not in that arena. I'm not in that field, but what I understand is what I understand. And usually when I do something like that, I do something like that with my brother. Shout out to the Fat Mac, Big Mike Almighty, Triple XL.
Loves the ladies.
Yeah, we do stuff like that, but we do it from our perspective. We always tell people practice the art that benefits you, eat the meat, spit out the bones, do that which works for you. So I don't get into the dating thing, but sometimes niggas like the power tricking shows. They love the power tricking shows. That's their thing, is the power tricking shows.
That's
They
crazy.
love the niggadry and the power
Well, I
tricking
mean,
shows.
that's fine. That's cool.
So, I do that from time to time, but I don't intend to be doing as much of that because that shit is getting tiring, especially because, most of this chatter that you hear about, it's about one kind of woman. It ain't even about everybody on here is obsessing and clowning and angry over hood rats. No matter what any of them tell you, it's all about hood rats. So they'll tell you that they want up tier women, but secretly they be in motherfuckers' emails.
We got to
Uh,
get you some more mods
yeah,
because
yeah.
your channel is growing.
Yeah, they'll tell you.
Naima is the best, but we got to
Yeah.
get her
Oh, I'm
support
sorry.
staff.
I'm glad you brought that to mind. Miss Buckner, shout out to Miss Buckner. She's always in here promoting. She's
She
very
needs some
supportive.
support staff.
She
Yeah.
is always on top of the game. Shout out to her. She's always in here promoting. Thank you, Miss Buckner. I can't thank you enough for what you do, ma'am. Thank you. But anyway, uh, what you a lot of things back to what I'm saying. A lot of shit you hear is about ratchets. It's about ratchets. It's about hood bitches, and the thing is that there's a lot of intimidation surrounding those women. So I don't want to beat that to death. I don't want to do that to death, regardless as to what
Oh,
anybody
yeah.
tells you.
Is your show up still that you did on April Mason? Or
Yes, it's up.
is
It
this
is.
on your channel, Max City?
It is on. It's on this channel actually. It's still on
Okay.
this channel. I didn't change it. It's still up.
Okay.
It's about ratchets.
Okay.
And no matter what they tell you, it's about ratchets because they go into niggas' boxes, inboxes, talking about confessing how much they love ratchets, and that's what it's about. It's always about ratchets. So I don't do shows because I think it's enough of that out there. Because much of the discussion that you're hearing is about ratchets. So with that being said, I plan to do very little of that content. So here, I plan to give people more substantive material. If you show up, wonderful. If you don't show up, still wonderful. I'm still going to do it. I would like to thank Miss Nicole Michelle for her support. I would like to thank all of you for stopping in here. I would like to thank my moderators. I would like to thank George Macon was in here. LAR was in here. Walt, Joe 100 is in here.
Game
Doug
changer.
is in here.
Mhm.
Anyway, Doug was in here. Jim Faison was in here. Thank him for coming
Mhm.
in. Neek Speaks, thank you for coming in. And all the other people, Cool Gent, thank you guys for hanging out with me.
Janelle hang tight. Yeah.
Chanel, thank you guys for coming in here. Got a lot of love for my chat. Got a lot of love for my subscribers. Got a lot of love for my mods. And as always, I'm up out of here. My link is on Miss Buckner's published. The links, if you want to support me on YouTube, support the channel. If you want to support me on Patreon, PayPal, or Cash App, the links for those sites are in my description box. If you support, cool. I would like you to support, but it is what it is. Uh, until next time, this is Tony Maceo, your boy, for Power and Strategy Radio, for my boy Big Mike at Max City Limits. Shout out to O'Shea Duke Jackson. Until next time, I wish you love, peace, and soul. And I am gone.